A 17-year-old boy with dirt on his hands and nothing in his pockets changes the entire world. He isn't chosen or special, and no ancient prophecy has his name written in gold on a temple wall. He changes the world simply because on one ordinary morning, while dragging a rusted plow through a field that wasn't even his blade catches on something buried so deep beneath the surface that no one alive had ever seen it. And what comes out of that ground does not just end one war. It ends an era. It opens a wound in the sky so massive that every living creature on the planet looks up at the same time, and every single one of them feels the exact same thing in their chest: terror. Because the gods above the clouds are no longer sleeping, and the crown that kept them chained for 400 years is now sitting in the cracked, calloused hands of a boy who doesn't even own the field he found it in. This is not a story about destiny. This is a story about what happens when the most dangerous object in the history of the world ends up with the one person nobody thought to protect it from. And before this is over, kingdoms will burn, gods will bleed, the sky itself will split open, and a low-rank farm laborer named Ren Ashfield will have to decide whether to save the world or simply let it swallow itself whole. Because sometimes the worst thing you can do is find something that was never meant to be found. Let's go. The Kingdom of Velmoor is not the kind of place that gets written about in adventure stories. It is not glittering. It is not magical in any obvious way. It is wide and flat and brown in most places, cut through by rivers that carry gray silt from the mountains and dump it across the farming lowlands called the dust fields. The dust fields stretch for 200 miles in every direction from the capital city of Thornwall, and they are exactly what the name suggests: dust fields. And the people who work them. The dust fields are divided into something called parcels. Each parcel is a chunk of farmland assigned to a landowner by the crown, and the landowners hire laborers to work it, or in a lot of cases they don't hire anyone at all. They just take in orphans and boys from poor villages and call it room and board in exchange for 12 hours of field work every day. They call these arrangements binding contracts. Everyone else calls them what they actually are: slavery with extra steps. Ren Ashfield has been on Parcel 19 since he was 8 years old. He is now 17. He has never been to Thornwall. He has never seen the ocean. He has never eaten a meal that didn't taste like ash and boiled grain. What he has done, for 9 years straight, is wake up before the sun rises, drag himself out of the communal sleeping barn that he shares with 11 other laborers, eat whatever gray paste the morning cook has left in the pot, and go work the land until his hands bleed. And he does this without complaint. He isn't stupid, and he knows exactly how wrong his situation is, but he endures it because Ren Ashfield has a plan. The plan is simple. He is going to join the Wardens. The Wardens are Velmoor's military force, and technically anyone can sign up. The problem is that the sign-up station is in Thornwall, and to get to Thornwall you need travel papers, and to get travel papers you need to not be bound to a parcel. And to not be bound to a parcel you need to complete your binding contract or buy your way out of it. Ren's contract runs until he turns 18. He has 8 months left. 8 months of the same gray paste, the same cracked earth, the same 12-hour days under the same flat sky. And then the plan begins. He has been preparing for it the whole time. Every evening after work, when the other laborers sleep or play dice or argue about nothing, Ren goes behind the sleeping barn and practices. He carves wooden swords from old fence posts. He practices stances he memorized from a military manual he found in the trash heap behind the landowner's house 3 years ago. He runs laps around the storage barn until his lungs catch fire. He does this every single night because in 8 months he is walking to Thornwall and signing his name on that warden enlistment form, and the life he has been living since he was 8 years old ends. Full stop. No negotiation. The other laborers think he's delusional. Some of them say it to his face. A kid named Boris, who is 19 and has worked Parcel 19 his whole life and fully intends to work it until he dies, tells Ren at least twice a week that wardens don't take parcel boys. That even if they did, a skinny kid who has never held a real weapon wouldn't last 3 days in training. That the only thing waiting for Ren in Thornwall is a longer kind of misery. Ren listens to all of it. And then he goes behind the barn and practices. Because here is what Boris doesn't understand. Ren has been reading. The old military manual he found is beaten up and missing pages, but it is not the only thing he has found in the trash heap behind the landowner's house. Over 3 years he has found 4 other books. One of them is a history of the Warden Corps. One is a partial account of the border wars from 60 years ago. One is a collection of letters between 2 military commanders that somehow ended up in the garbage and which Ren has read so many times he has memorized entire sections. And the last one, the one he keeps under his sleeping mat and only reads by the light of a candle he makes himself from tallow and a string wick, is the strangest book of the 4. It is called The Architecture of Heaven and the Bones of the Old War, and it is the kind of book that most people in Velmoor don't believe is nonfiction. It reads like mythology. It is full of accounts of creatures called the Cloudborn, beings who live above the permanent cloud layer that blankets the sky above the Midlands at a height of roughly 3 miles. creatures of impossible size and strength who, according to the book, govern the sky and the upper winds and the great storm systems that circle the world. Beings that humans once called gods, and who the humans of the old era feared so completely that entire kingdoms were built in caves just to hide from their attention. The book describes a man named Aldrich, called Aldrich the Unbowed, who was the first king of Velmor 400 years ago. According to the account, Aldrich was not a great warrior. He was not even a particularly impressive king. What he was, according to the book, was the maker of the Yoke of Heaven, an artifact, a crown of fused iron and something the book calls void silver, forged over the course of a decade using techniques that are not described in any detail, apparently because the author didn't want anyone replicating them. The Yoke of Heaven, when placed on the head of a human with the right bloodline, apparently projected a field of absolute authority over the Cloudborn. Not persuasion. Not negotiation. Authority. The kind that bypasses the mind and goes straight to the body. The kind that makes a creature with the strength to tear a mountain apart simply stop and kneel. Aldrich used the Yoke of Heaven to end the old war between the Cloudborn and humanity. He walked up into the cloud layer through a mountain pass that no longer exists, entered the sky realm, and put the yoke on his head and told every Cloudborn in range of its signal to go to sleep and stay there. According to the book, they did. The Cloudborn retreated into the deep sky. The cloud layer closed behind them. And for 400 years, the sky above Velmor has been quiet. The book ends on a note that Ren has read so many times the page has soft dents where his fingers press. The author writes, "The yoke did not destroy the Cloudborn. It did not send them to another world or reduce them to dust. It put them to sleep. And the nature of sleep is that it ends." Aldrich knew this. He said so in the second year of the peace, when a minister asked him what would happen when the yoke's effect faded. Aldrich's answer was recorded by 3 separate court scribes. He said, "Find it before they wake." And then Aldrich died without telling anyone where he buried it. Ren has thought about this passage approximately 10,000 times in the 3 years since he first read it. He thinks about it the way you think about a dream you can't quite hold on to. It presses on the inside of his skull like something that wants to get out. He has no particular reason to believe the book is true. He has no particular reason to believe any of it. The wardens don't teach history of the Cloudborn. The kingdom's official position, as far as Ren can tell from the books and letters he has scavenged, is that the Cloudborn are folklore. Peasant mythology. Stories told by uneducated people in the old era to explain weather patterns and natural disasters. There are no Cloudborn. There is no sky realm. The cloud layer is just clouds. Moisture and cold air. Nothing else. Ren believes the book. He does not know why. He just does. This detail, this single small detail in his personal history, is going to become the most important fact about him in about 3 hours. But right now it is just past sunrise on an ordinary day in the early spring, and Ren is dragging the plow across the northeast edge of Parcel 19, which is the section that hasn't been turned in 2 years and which the landowner, a man named Grast Holloway, has decided needs to be reopened this season. Grast is the kind of man whose face always looks like he just smelled something bad. He is 51 years old, has owned Parcel 19 for 20 years, and in that time has never once personally touched the soil he profits from. He stands at the edge of the field on mornings like this one wearing his heavy coat and his thick boots and tells the laborers what to do with the kind of voice that assumes complete obedience and has never been surprised. Ren does not like Grast. He does not pretend otherwise. He does the work because the work is what gets him to the end of the contract, and the end of the contract is what gets him to the warden enlistment form, and nothing else matters until then. So he pulls the plow. He drags it through the hard northeastern soil. He goes back and forth in rows, and the soil turns up brown and dark with old moisture trapped under the surface crust, and it smells like roots and worms and old stone. He does this for 2 hours before the blade catches. He thinks at first that it's a rock. The northeastern section is full of them. He tries to pull the plow back and go around. The blade doesn't move. He crouches down and starts digging with his hands around the obstruction, pulling away the topsoil in chunks, and realizes almost immediately that what the blade has caught is not a rock. It is smooth on top. Too smooth. Worked smooth. Man-made smooth. He digs faster. It takes him 20 minutes. He digs out an object the size and rough shape of a wheel hub, but flatter. It is made of 2 materials that he can immediately distinguish by color and texture. Most of it is dark iron, almost black, with a surface that despite being buried for what he estimates is at least a century shows almost no corrosion. The rust is there at the edges, the faintest orange dusting, but the core of the metal is pristine in a way that does not make sense for something that has been underground. And threaded through the iron, in a pattern of veins so fine they almost look like they were painted on, is a second metal, silver. But not any silver Ren has ever seen. It is too dark, too still. It does not catch the morning light the way normal metal should. It seems to absorb it. It is shaped like a crown. Ren stares at it for a long time. His hands are already on it from the digging. His fingers are touching the void silver veins and the ancient iron, and the morning air is cold and still, and somewhere in the back of his skull something starts buzzing, soft and low, like a sound he can almost but not quite hear. He lifts it out of the ground. The buzzing gets louder. He turns it over in his hands. It is heavier than it looks. The bottom edge has a slight flare to it, the way real crowns do. The top edge has 7 points of unequal height. The void silver veins run in a pattern that is not decorative, he realizes, but technical. Intentional. Like circuit lines. Like the inside of a mechanism he doesn't understand. He turns it over once more. And on the inside surface, on the flat interior band of iron that would sit against a skull, he sees text. It is in an older form of the Velmore script, pre-reform lettering that he has to squint at and work through slowly because the only reason he can read it at all is because the military history book used a lot of pre-reform citations. It takes him 3 minutes to work out what it says. Authority given. Authority held. Authority transferred. The one who holds the yoke speaks. The sky obeys. Rin sits back in the dirt. He is not a superstitious person. He does not believe in fate. He does not believe that things happen for reasons. What he believes in is cause and effect, hard work, and the warden enlistment form he is going to sign in 8 months. That is the full extent of his belief system. But he is holding the yoke of heaven. He knows he is. He feels it the same way you sense a storm rolling in, impossible to explain, yet undeniably real. It isn't any single, specific sign, but rather the overwhelming weight of everything hitting him at once, the way the metal feels far too alive in his grip, and the quiet buzz in his skull that has swelled into a steady roar without him even noticing the shift. The way the void silver veins, which he could have sworn were dark when he first picked it up, are now faintly, barely but definitely, glowing. He sits in the dirt on the northeast edge of Parcel 19 and holds the yoke of heaven, and for the first time in his 17 years, his plan feels genuinely, completely irrelevant. He hides it. Hiding the object is his first truly intelligent move. It isn't born from a grand strategy, but rather a simple understanding of his own reality. As a parcel laborer, he has no legal claim to anything found in the dirt. He knows that if Grast Holloway ever caught wind of something valuable being unearthed in his field, the man would undoubtedly seize it for himself. So Rin wraps the yoke in the canvas he uses to cover the plow handles in the rain, and he buries the wrapped bundle under the loose board at the back of the storage barn where he has been keeping his books for 3 years. Grast has never once looked there. As far as Grast is concerned, the storage barn is for tools and sacks of seed. What is under the loose board is not his business because he has never cared enough to make it his business. Rin finishes the day's work. He eats his gray paste. He goes behind the sleeping barn and practices his sword forms with the wooden post. He goes to bed. He does not tell anyone. He also cannot sleep. He lies on his sleeping mat and stares at the roof, and the buzzing in his skull that has been there since he touched the yoke does not stop. It is not painful. It is not even uncomfortable in a traditional sense. It is more like having a second heartbeat in your head, low, steady, persistent. And occasionally, when the barn is quiet and the other laborers are breathing the slow, even rhythm of deep sleep, the buzzing resolves briefly into something almost like words. Not real words. Not a voice. More like an impression of words. The way you understand the meaning of something in a dream without anyone actually saying it. The impression Rin keeps getting over and over through the night is this: it is time. He does not sleep. He watches the roof get lighter as dawn approaches. He thinks about the book and Aldrich and the passage about finding it before they wake. He thinks about the crown sitting under the loose board 20 feet away. He thinks about the warden enlistment form 8 months away. He thinks about all of these things in a rapid cycle that never slows down, and when the cook starts moving around by the gray paste pot at the first gray light, Rin gets up and he goes and does the morning work the same as always. But something has changed. He can feel it in the air. Not around him. In him. Like a door he didn't know was there has opened the smallest crack. He needs information. He needs to know if what he found is real, what it does, how it works, and what to do with it. And the only place he can think of that might have actual answers is not somewhere he can reach from Parcel 19. It is the Royal Archives in Thornwall. And this is where Rin makes a decision that will define everything that comes after. He decides to go. Not in 8 months when his contract ends. Without permission. Without papers. Without a plan beyond getting to the capital, getting into the archives somehow, and finding out what he is holding. He is going to break his binding contract. This is not a small decision. Breaking a binding contract is illegal under Velmore law. The penalty is 2 additional years of enforced labor on top of the original contract, served at a state workhouse, which is the worst version of what he already has. If he runs and gets caught, he goes from 8 months left to 2.5 more years in a place with no storage barn and no loose board and no books. Everything he has been building falls apart. He decides to go anyway. Because of the buzzing in his skull. Because of what the book said. Because Grassed Holloway is snoring in his house 60 yards away and the sky above the permanent cloud layer is doing something that Ren has been noticing for 3 days and finally has a word for. Shaking. Not visible shaking. Not the earth below. The cloud layer above. He noticed it first 2 days ago, a subtle ripple in the cloud bank that he dismissed as wind effect. He noticed it again yesterday. And this morning, before sunrise, he lay on his back in the dirt behind the sleeping barn during his practice break and looked straight up, and the cloud layer, which is normally a solid flat gray ceiling at 3 miles up, was moving. Not in the usual winddrift way. In a vertical way. In a way that made it look, for just a moment in the pre-dawn dark, like the underside of something breathing. Ren rolls his sleeping mat. He takes his books. He takes the yoke in its canvas wrapping and he ties it to the inside of his coat with a strip of leather. He takes the small amount of coin he has saved over 3 years of doing extra tasks for the other laborers, a total of 11 copper marks, which is not enough for anything but is better than nothing. He waits until Grass's snoring reaches its deepest register and then he walks north, toward Thornwall in the dark. 2 days of walking. Sleeping in ditches and under hedgerows. Eating nothing except 2 apples he finds in a ditch and a handful of meal he wrapped and took from the kitchen without asking. He is 16 miles from the capital when a warden patrol finds him on the road. This is not as catastrophic as it sounds. The patrol is 3 soldiers on horseback doing a border road circuit, and what they see is a dirty, thin teenager walking alone on a farm road with a canvas bundle under his arm. They ask him his papers. He tells them he doesn't have any. They ask him his parcel. He tells them parcel 19. One of them looks at the others with the exact expression you'd expect, which is the expression of a man who has been doing this job for long enough to know that runaway parcel boys are a common enough occurrence that there is a standard process for them. Which is, put them on the back of a horse, take them to the nearest parcel office in the next town, write up the violation, and let the parcel office deal with the notification to the landowner. The nearest town has a parcel office the size of a closet in the back of a grain merchant's building. The officer on duty is a tired-looking man named Holt who is clearly in the middle of his lunch and does not look at Ren with anger so much as inconvenience. He asks Ren for his full name and parcel assignment for the record. He writes it down. He tells Ren to sit in the corner and wait while he finishes his lunch and sends a notification rider to parcel 19. Ren sits in the corner. He waits. He watches Holt eat a meat pie in 4 enormous bites. And then he looks at the parcel office's only window, which opens onto an alley, and he looks at the lock on the window, which is a simple slide bolt, and he looks at Holt, whose back is turned as he writes his notification, and he looks at the window again. He is through the window and running down the alley before Holt's quill finishes the letter N in notification. He hears shouting behind him. He doesn't stop. He goes through alleys and across a cart yard and under a fence and through a vegetable garden and into a stand of trees at the edge of the town, and he runs through the trees until his lungs are tearing apart, and then he runs more, because the notification has already been sent and he has maybe 2 hours before Grassed Holloway knows he is gone and the search becomes official. He needs to be in Thornwall before that. He needs the crowds. He runs for 3 hours. He walks for 2 more. He reaches the outer gate of Thornwall at dusk, with people streaming in and out of the gate in the end-of-day traffic, and he puts his head down and he walks through in the middle of a group of grain merchants and their carts, and he is inside the capital before anyone looks at him twice. Thornwall is the first large city Ren has ever seen. He is aware this is happening to him right now, the first city experience, but he doesn't have time to be stunned by it. He needs the Royal Archives. He needs to find out what he's carrying and what it means. He can be amazed by the city on the other side of this. So he takes in what he needs to navigate, which is that Thornwall is built in rings. Outer ring is trade and market. Middle ring is residences and civic buildings. Inner ring is the palace complex, the government buildings, and the royal archives. He needs to get from the outer ring to the inner ring without being caught, without papers, and without money to bribe anyone. He finds a pump in the market district and washes his face and hands and tries to beat the worst of the dust out of his coat. He scrapes mud off his boots with a stick. He ties his hair back neatly. He does not look like a parcel runaway exactly, he thinks. He looks like a poor person, which in a city this size is not unusual. There are plenty of poor people in Thornwall who are not wanted by anyone. He gets to the outer wall of the inner ring at full dark. There is a checkpoint. He watches it for half an hour from across the street and identifies the pattern. Papers check for anyone who looks like they might be someone. Wave through for anyone in a uniform or carrying official-looking items. Blind eye for service workers and deliverers who come through the eastern gate with carts. He finds a bakery delivery cart behind a shop on the east side. The driver is inside talking. Ren climbs on the back of the cart behind the flour sacks. The driver comes out, loads 2 more sacks, and drives through the eastern gate. The checkpoint guard glances at the driver, waves him through without looking at the back of the cart. Ren drops off the back of the cart on the inner side and disappears into the inner ring streets before the driver has gone another 50 yards. He asks a street sweeper where the royal archives are. The The street sweeper looks at him with mild suspicion and then points east along a wide cobbled avenue. Ren goes east. He finds the Archives building, which is a 3-story stone structure with pillars at the entrance and a door that is currently locked because it is past standard operating hours. He walks around the building. The east wall has a window on the second floor that is slightly open, a thin crack of dark space between window and frame. There is a drain pipe on the corner of the building 6 feet from the window. Ren grew up climbing fence posts to get fruit from trees, climbing barn roofs to fix leaks in exchange for extra food, climbing anything that could be climbed because height was interesting to him in a way that ground level wasn't. He is up the drain pipe and through the window in under 2 minutes, landing soft on a wooden floor in a room that smells overwhelmingly of old paper and lamp oil. He is in the Royal Archives. He has absolutely no idea where in the Royal Archives he needs to look. The room he has entered appears to be a catalog room, with rows of wooden drawers labeled in small writing. He pulls a small candle from his coat pocket, one of the tallow ones he makes himself, lights it with a flint striker, and holds it up to read the nearest drawer labels. They are organized by subject. He starts looking for anything that might relate to the Cloudborn, or to Aldrich, or to the Old Era. He is in the wrong section. This is natural history. He moves deeper into the building. He finds the historical section on the ground floor. The drawer labels here are more promising. Kingdom of Velmore, Foundation Era. Kingdom of Velmore, Reign of Aldrich I. He opens the Aldrich drawer. It is crammed with rolled documents. He starts pulling them out and reading by candlelight, and he is so absorbed in this that he does not hear the footsteps until they are right behind him. He spins around. The candle almost goes out. A girl is standing 3 feet away from him. She is about his age, maybe a year older. She is wearing a dark coat with the hood back, and her hair is dark and straight and cut to her jaw. She is carrying a lamp of her own, much better quality than his candle, and she is looking at him with an expression that is not afraid. Not angry either. Curious. Specifically, she is looking at the Aldrich documents in his hands and the canvas bundle under his arm with the kind of focus that suggests she knows something about both. She says, "Those are in the wrong order. The Aldrich Foundation documents are filed by scribe, not by year. If you want the first era Cloudborn accounts, you need the Morast collection, which is in the cabinet to your left." Ren stares at her. "Who are you?" She says, "Sarah." And then, after a pause, "I come here often." In the middle of the night? The archives are less crowded at night. She is still looking at the canvas bundle. "Is that a plough canvas?" "Yes." "Why are you carrying a plough canvas in the Royal Archives of Thornwall at night?" Ren looks at her for a long moment. Then he says, "I think I found the Yoke of Heaven." She goes very still. Her eyes move to his face. And there is a look in them that is nothing like skepticism. It is the exact opposite of skepticism. It is the look of someone who has spent years waiting for someone to say exactly that sentence. She says, "Show me." Ren is not going to show some stranger in a library the most dangerous artifact in Velmore history. That is the obvious position. He opens his mouth to say this. She is already reaching for the canvas bundle. He steps back. She stops. They look at each other across 3 feet of archive floor. She says, "I am Sarah Velmore. I am the king's daughter. I have been reading every account of the Yoke of Heaven in this archive for the last 2 years. I know what it is, what it does, and why it matters. And you found it in a field, which means either you're lying or the world is about to change in ways neither of us is ready for. So please show me." Ren says, "You're the princess." "Yes." "Why are you in the archives in the middle of the night instead of in the palace?" She gives him a look that is very tired and very briefly real. "Because in the daytime there are people in here. And when people see me reading about the Cloudborn, they report it to my father's advisor, and then my father's advisor tells me that the Cloudborn are peasant mythology and that I am embarrassing the crown by studying folklore, and I have to stop for 2 weeks and then start again at night." She pauses. "It's a very tedious cycle. Now please show me the object." He shows her the object. She takes one look at it and sits down on the floor. Not dramatically. Just suddenly, like her legs made an executive decision without consulting her. She sits on the archive floor with her lamp beside her and she stares at the Yoke of Heaven in Ren's hands, and she is silent for almost a full minute. Then she says, "The Void Silver is still active. It shouldn't be. It's been underground for 400 years. The Void Silver in the old texts is described as a carrier material. It holds and transmits the authority signal, but it needs to be regularly recharged by proximity to a Cloudborn body. If it's still active after 4 centuries, that means that there are Cloudborn close enough to recharge it." She looks up at him sharply. "You read the texts." "I read a book. The Architecture of Heaven and the Bones of the Old War. I found it in a trash heap. That book is supposed to be destroyed. Every copy the crown found was burned 30 years ago." She stares at him. Where did you find it? Behind a landowner's house on parcel 19. I think he threw it out by accident. It was with some broken furniture. She is still staring at him. He can see her recalibrating something. What's your name? Ren. Ren Ashfield. Ashfield. She says it slowly. There is something in her expression when she says it. Something that flickers and then goes careful. He notices it but does not yet know what it means. How long have you had it? I found it yesterday morning. I ran for Thornwall immediately. Did anyone see you find it? No. I was working alone on the northeast section. And no one has touched it since you? Just me. She stands up. She is back to fully composed, the brief vulnerability of sitting on the floor gone. Then the yoke has bonded to you. Or it's in the process of bonding. The void silver should have gone dark when Aldrich died. The fact that it's still active means it transferred. You're the first person of compatible blood to touch it since him. Ren says, I'm a parcel laborer from a farming village. I know. She says it with something that is not quite apology and not quite acknowledgement but something between them. It's not about your station. The compatibility is genetic. The yoke was designed to accept anyone carrying a specific lineage marker, and that marker can survive in a bloodline for a very long time, thinning with each generation until it's barely there, but still there. If it responded to you, it's because it found what it was looking for. However faint. What lineage? She looks at him. Looks at the yoke. Looks back at him. And here she makes a choice. He can see her make it, to tell him the part that the official archive records don't contain but the private collection does, the part she found in a sealed box in the subbasement 3 months ago that she has not told anyone. Aldrich didn't just lock the Cloudborn away with the yoke, she says. The texts say he walked into the Sky Realm and put it on his head and commanded them. But the official texts don't explain why they obeyed. Why an artifact made by a human could project authority over beings of that magnitude. The private records, the ones they tried to destroy, explain it. Aldrich's mother was not human. The archive is very quiet. She was Cloudborn, Sarah says. A Cloudborn who chose to come down. Who took a smaller form and lived among humans and had children. Aldrich was half Cloudborn. The yoke works because the authority it carries is not just human-made. It's built on Cloudborn blood. It speaks a language the Cloudborn recognize in their deepest biology, the language of their own kind giving an absolute command. A full Cloudborn or a half Cloudborn wearing the yoke would project an authority signal that the Skyborn cannot override. Their bodies simply respond. It is above conscious choice. She looks at Ren with the expression of someone delivering information they know is going to detonate. If the yoke bonded to you, she says, then somewhere in your bloodline, however far back, however diluted, there is Cloudborn blood. It is the only thing that would make you compatible. Ren holds the yoke for a long time. He looks at his hands. The cracked, calloused, perpetually dirty hands of a boy who has plowed fields since he was 8. He looks at the void silver veins that are faintly glowing against the dark iron. He looks at Sarah. He says, the sky was shaking this morning. She goes completely still. What? The cloud layer. I've been watching it for 3 days. It's moving wrong. Not windrift. Vertical movement. Like breathing. She crosses the room and pulls a cabinet open and takes out a rolled document so fast it almost falls. She spreads it on the reading table and holds her lamp over it. This is a summary of anomalous cloud observations submitted by farmers and road guards over the last 6 weeks. I had a copy made. She runs her finger down a column of dates and locations. 17 reports of unusual cloud behavior in the last 6 weeks. All of them describe vertical oscillation. 2 of them describe what witnesses call a low resonant sound, below the normal threshold of human hearing, that they felt in their chest rather than heard. She looks at him. The Cloudborn are not sleeping. The buzzing in Ren's skull, which has been steady since he touched the yoke, spikes hard. Not painfully. More like a tuning fork that has just found its note. He grabs the edge of the reading table. Sarah sees it. Are you all right? The yoke, he says. It's responding to what you said. She stares at him. At the yoke. At the faintly pulsing void silver veins that are now distinctly, visibly brighter. Put it on, she says. What? Put it on. If you're compatible and it's bonded to you, it won't hurt you. But I need to know if it activates fully on direct contact with your blood. Put it on. You just told me this thing commands gods and you want me to put it on my head in a library. Yes. He stands there for another 3 seconds. Then he puts it on. The world does not end. No bolt of light descends. The archive does not shake. Nothing visible or dramatic happens in the physical space of the room. What happens is inside Ren's skull. The buzzing stops. In its place is a silence so complete that he can hear individual seconds pass. And in that silence, stretching out in all directions like a map being drawn by someone who has never seen a map, he feels the world. Not in words. Not in images exactly. In presence. He feels the archive around him. The city outside the walls. The fields he came from. The roads between. And then, above all of it, above the farmland and the city and the rivers and the flat brown plains of the dust fields, above the cloud layer that sits at 3 miles like a lid, he feels something else. Weight. Enormous. Breathing. Close. Not one presence. Many. Dozens. More. They are right above the cloud layer. All of them. And they are not sleeping. And they feel him back. He tears the yoke off his head and gasps. Sarah is beside him instantly, her hand on his arm. What did you feel? He tells her. His voice is not entirely steady and he does not try to pretend otherwise because there is no point. He tells her about the presence above the clouds, the weight, the dozens, the way they felt him back the moment the yoke went on his head, like a signal sent and returned. He tells her they are not sleeping. He tells her he thinks they have not been sleeping for some time. He tells her they feel like something enormous and ancient and very, very awake. Sarah lets out a long breath. She presses her hand over her mouth for a moment. Then she takes it down and her face is composed again and she says, "We need to tell my father. Your father's advisor told you the Cloudborn are peasant mythology. My father's advisor is not my father." She looks at him. The king needs to know that the yoke has been found and that the Cloudborn are not sleeping. Whatever comes next, it cannot be navigated by 2 people in a library. We need the crown's resources. Ren says, "I'm a runaway parcel laborer. If I walk into the palace, I get arrested." She looks at him with a very level expression. "You will walk in with me. No one arrests my guests." He looks at her. "Are you doing that thing where you are technically correct but overlooking something crucial? The crucial thing is that we don't have time to argue." The Cloudborn felt the yoke activate. They now know someone is wearing it. That changes their behavior and we have no idea how or how fast. "So yes, you are walking in with me." She is already wrapping the yoke back in his canvas. She wraps it better than he had it, tighter, and hands it back. "And for the love of everything, do not let that touch any metal objects." The void silver has a conduction resonance. Iron and steel in range of an active yoke can develop microfractures in a certain frequency range. Which is why Aldrich apparently kept it wrapped in treated leather, which we do not have, so canvas will have to do. She picks up her lamp. She moves to the door. Ren stands there for a second. He came to this city to look something up. He arrived less than 3 hours ago. He broke into a library. He found a princess. He put a 400-year-old artifact on his head and felt sleeping gods wake up. 8 months from now he was going to sign a warden enlistment form. He follows her. King Idrin III of Velmor is 57 years old and he has been king for 22 years and he is not a bad king. This is the most complicated sentence in the description of him. He is not cruel. He is not corrupt. He is not particularly clever, but he is also not stupid. He is the exact kind of ruler that happens when a man of moderate intelligence, reasonable intentions, and extremely limited curiosity about the dangerous parts of his own kingdom inherits a throne that was handed down to him by a man who was also moderate in most of the same ways. He is, in the truest sense, adequate. And an adequate king in a normal era is fine. An adequate king at the moment when the Cloudborn wake up is a problem. His royal advisor is a man named Kael Drost. This is where the story starts to get complicated. Kael Drost is 54 years old. He has been King Idrin's advisor for 15 years and he has spent those 15 years building a position so central to the king's decision-making process that at this point, in practical terms, Kael Drost makes most of the decisions. The king signs things. The king appears at court functions. The king delivers speeches from his throne. But the policies, the appointments, the resource allocations, the military posture, all of it flows through Kael Drost. Everyone in the inner court knows this. Most of them resent it. None of them have ever been able to do anything about it because Kael Drost is, unlike the king, extremely clever, and he has spent 15 years making sure that every person in the inner court who might challenge him has found themselves reassigned, disgraced, or quietly persuaded to retire. He is also, and this is the part that absolutely no one knows, in correspondence with the Cloudborn. Not all the Cloudborn. Not even most. A specific faction. A specific individual. But they have been writing to each other, through a channel that Kael figured out 11 years ago and has been maintaining ever since, a specific kind of signal that passes through the cloud layer encoded in a pattern of high-frequency sound that only certain instruments can produce and only certain Cloudborn can read, and they have been making a plan. For 11 years. And that plan, which Kael has been building toward with the patience of a man who thinks in decades rather than seasons, is now 5 days from execution. He knows the yoke was found last night. He does not know how he knows this. He just felt a shift in the signal from above, A specific pattern change in the resonance that comes down through the cloud layer that tells him something happened. Something activated. He sits in his office at dawn and turns this knowledge over carefully, and he concludes that he has maybe 24 hours to find out what happened and contain it before it disrupts the plan. This is the man who is in the council chamber when Sarah walks in with Ren Ashfield and presents the Yoke of Heaven to her father. The council chamber is exactly as uncomfortable as you would imagine. The king is at the head of the table. Kale Drost is at his right hand. There are 6 other advisors and 2 generals, and all of them look at Sarah with the expression reserved for a member of royalty who has done something awkward, and then they look at Ren with the expression reserved for a person who should absolutely not be in the council chamber, and then they look at what Sarah is placing on the table and nobody has any expression at all because there is a crown made of black iron and gently glowing silver sitting in the middle of the king's council table and the air around it is doing something very slight and very impossible. Sarah presents it calmly. She is composed, precise, and thorough. She lays out the history. She references the archive documents by catalog number. She explains the void silver resonance. She explains what Ren experienced when he put it on, the presence above the clouds, the fact that they felt it back. She explains that the cloud oscillation reports over the last 6 weeks suggest the Cloudborn have been awake and active above the cloud layer for at least that long, probably longer. She explains that the yoke being found now, by a compatible carrier, is not coincidence. The Cloudborn's increased activity is reaching a threshold that is close to something and the yoke activating is a response to that. She speaks for 12 minutes without pause and without notes and without looking at anyone other than her father, because the argument is for her father and there is no point in presenting it to anyone else in the room. King Idrin listens to all of it with the expression of a man hearing something he would very much prefer not to have to process. When Sarah finishes he is quiet for a moment and then he says, Kale. Kale Drost looks at the yoke. Ren, who is standing at the far end of the table feeling every bit as out of place as he looks, watches Kale look at the yoke. And something about the way Kale looks at it is wrong. It is not the look of a man seeing something unexpected. It is the look of a man seeing something he already knew about and is now calculating how to respond to its appearance in a context he didn't plan for. It is the look of a man who is already several moves ahead. Ren has spent 9 years around Grassed Holloway, who is also a man who is always several moves ahead when it comes to getting what he wants from people with no power, and he recognizes the shape of that look. He does not say this aloud. He files it. Kale says, Your Highness, the princess's research is thorough as always and I mean no disrespect to her scholarship. But the object on the table, whatever it is, does not necessarily confirm the larger interpretation. The cloud anomaly reports are easily explained by seasonal atmospheric variance. The object could be a medieval ceremonial crown of no particular significance, the glowing metal a natural phosphorescent compound found in certain or deposits in the northeast farmlands. He pauses. I would recommend having the palace metallurgist examine the crown before we construct any larger narrative around it. The king nods slowly. This is what Kale always does. Take something alarming and make it sound like a problem for specialists rather than a problem for decision makers. And the king always responds the same way, with relief, because adequacy is comfortable with solutions it doesn't have to generate itself. Sarah says, Father, with respect, the void silver is active. That means the Cloudborn above the cloud layer are close enough and awake enough to be recharging it. That is not atmospheric variance. That is a specific, technical phenomenon that requires a specific, technical explanation. Kale, the princess says the void silver is active. Has anyone other than the princess and this laborer verified this? Everyone in the room looks at the crown. Nobody moves towards it. Ren watches them not move towards it and understands that they are not moving towards it because they know it's real. All of them. The glow is right there in front of them. The slight distortion in the air around it. The way it does not sit on the table like a regular object sits on a table, with heaviness and stillness, but seems to exist in a way that is slightly more present than the table itself. Every person in this room who has eyes can see it, but seeing it means having to deal with it, and having to deal with it means the adequate moderate king of a flat farming kingdom might have to confront the possibility that the sky above his country is full of ancient divine warriors who are waking up. Nobody moves. Ren picks up the yoke. He puts it on his head. The room goes absolutely silent. He does the thing again, reaches out through the yoke signal, finds the presence above the clouds. But this time, with the yoke fully active and with his attention specifically directed, he does not just feel them as a general weight. He feels individual presences, large, distinct, like very faraway torches, each one a specific brightness and character. He finds the cloud layer edge just above the 3-mile mark, and just above that edge he feels them clustered. not spread out, gathered, waiting. And then he feels something else. Something he didn't feel the first time. Something below the gathered cloud-born, coming from one of them, a signal directed downward. Directed specifically at the palace. Specific, targeted and tight. A line of communication. Going from one cloud-born to something directly below it. He takes the yoke off his head. He puts it on the table. He looks at Kaeldrost. He says, one of them is talking to someone down here. Right now. Through the cloud layer. A narrow signal aimed at the palace district. The council chamber is so quiet you could hear a moth blink. Kaeldrost does not change expression. This is the most incriminating thing about his response. A man who was not guilty would react with surprise or confusion or dismissal. Kael's face does the thing that faces do when they receive a blow they were already prepared for. It absorbs it. Stays still. Files it. Ren watches Kael absorb his words and he thinks, you already knew. He does not say this. Not yet. Because he is 17, in the palace council chamber without papers, in front of the king. He needs to be careful about what he says and when. But he files it deep, next to the other filing. The king says, Kael? Kael says, the boy is speculating. He has no way to determine the direction of a signal from the sky realm. He held the crown for 10 seconds. The king looks at Ren. Then at Sarah. Then at the yoke on the table. And there is a moment, a very clear, very important moment, when King Idran III is exactly adequate. He looks at the truth sitting in front of him and he does the adequate thing, which is to defer. He says, we'll have the metallurgist examine the object. In the meantime, we keep this in-house. No word of this leaves this chamber. He looks at Ren. Who are you? Sarah says, he is Ren Ashfield of Parcel 19, Your Highness. He found the crown and brought it to Thornwall immediately upon discovery. He is the crown's finder and as such is entitled to protective custody under the ancient salvage law, which grants legal status to any citizen who delivers a recovered royal artifact to the palace. Ren was not aware of this law. He suspects Sarah was not aware of it until she needed it 3 minutes ago and went through the entire catalog of obscure legal precedents in her memory to find it. He does not say this. The king looks tired. Fine. Have him washed and given clothes. He stays in the palace until we determine what this is. He looks at the yoke. And cover that thing up. The palace assigns Ren a room. The room is the smallest one in the east wing, a servant's room that Sarah apologizes for and Ren thinks is, genuinely, the nicest room he has ever been in. It has a bed with more than one blanket. It has a window. It has a water basin with soap. He stands in it for about 30 seconds just taking it in. Then he washes. Then he puts on the clothes a palace servant brought, which are plain but clean, and he sits on the edge of the bed and he thinks. He thinks about Kaeldrost and the way Kael looked at the yoke before he spoke and the way Kael's face absorbed the news about the directed signal without surprise. He thinks about the presence above the cloud layer that he felt, the gathering, the waiting. He thinks about the narrow signal line going down into the palace district like a wire. He takes the yoke out and looks at it in his hands. He does not put it on. He just looks at it. The void silver is still glowing, steady and low, and he finds in the quiet of the room that even without wearing it he can feel a faint version of the signal. The presence above. The weight. Not the full picture. Not the individual torches. Just the general sense of something enormous sitting just above the visible sky. He picks up the Architecture of Heaven book from his coat, the one he carried from Parcel 19. He opens it to the section he has read the least, the last third, which describes the physical nature of the sky realm. The Cloudborn's home. He has always focused on the earlier sections about the war and Aldrich and the yoke. He reads the last section now, carefully, with more attention than he has given it before. The sky realm is not just clouds. That is the first and most important thing the text makes clear. The cloud layer is a boundary, a membrane between the human midlands altitude and a higher atmospheric zone where the physics work differently. Above the cloud layer the air density changes in ways that do not follow normal atmospheric models. There are zones of suspended stone and compacted air matter that form structures, platforms, ridges, entire mountainous formations, all floating at altitudes between 3 and 20 miles up. The Cloudborn built on these formations. Cities, fortresses, cultivation systems for the particular mineral-dense cloud plants they consume. An entire civilization. The book has drawings, rough and amateur, based on accounts given by the handful of humans who went up through the old mountain pass before Aldrich sealed it. The drawings show enormous architecture. Buildings scaled for beings who stand between 20 and 40 feet tall. Columns as thick as trees. Gates as tall as castles. And the Cloudborn themselves, drawn in the style of the era, which tends toward the terrifying, all-sharp edges and enormous scale and faintly luminous skin. But there is a section deeper in the last third that Ren has glossed over before. He reads it now. It is titled, the Cloudborn's division and the two courts. It says, the Cloudborn are not a unified people. They have never been. Their civilization is divided into two courts, which the author calls the Riven and the Hollow. The Riven are the warrior caste, the builders, the vast majority. They are the ones who fought the humans in the old war. They are the ones who knelt to the yoke. They are the ones who are, by all accounts, sleeping in the deep sky now. The Hollow are different. They are described as a smaller, older group. Not warrior caste but something closer to what humans might call scholars or priests. Keepers of the deep sky knowledge. And they are described in terms that the author seems uncomfortable with. He writes, the Hollow do not sleep the way the Riven sleep. The yoke's authority reached them and they bent to it, but bending is not the same as going. They went to a deeper place. A place that the Riven cannot reach and that the yoke's signal cannot fully penetrate. The void deep. Whether this choice was compliance or retreat, I cannot say. But the Hollow are not gone. I believe, with no evidence I can produce, that they are waiting. Ren reads this 3 times. Then he looks at the yoke. Then he thinks about the presence above the clouds that he felt. He thought he felt dozens. He thought they were Riven. But what he felt when he put the yoke on and reached out, the individual torches, the specific distinct presences, they did not all feel the same. Most of them felt large and simple and ancient and sleeping but waking, like animals emerging from hibernation. But there was one that did not feel like hibernation. One that felt like purpose. Like waiting. Like a held breath. Old in a way that the others were not, even though the others were already incomprehensibly old. It was the one sending the narrow signal down into the palace district. It is a Hollow. He has been corresponding with Kaeldrost for 11 years. And they have a plan. Ren sits on the edge of the bed for a long time after this. Then he gets up. He needs to find Sarah. He finds her 2 corridors over, in a small study that she has clearly been using for some time, with documents spread across every surface and a map of the kingdom on the wall with dozens of small pin marks. She is standing at the window looking out at the night sky when he comes in. She has been crying very recently, and she is over it and completely composed again by the time he speaks, but he notices it. The faint redness at the edge of her eyes. He does not mention it. He tells her about the Riven and the Hollow. He shows her the passage in the book. She reads it. She reads it again. She goes to one of the piles of documents and pulls out 3 pages and cross-references them with the passage and then sets all of it down and says, the signal. You said it was narrow. Directed at the palace district. Not the palace. The district. He thinks about this. The palace district is the palace, the archive, the administrative buildings. Kael's private residence. She says it flat. No particular expression. Kaeldrost's private residence is in the inner palace district. His office is in the palace proper, but he maintains a separate residence 300 meters east of the main gate where he says he does his late-night study and correspondence. She looks at the window. 11 years. You knew something was wrong with him. I knew he was hiding things. I didn't know what. She pauses. The plan. If there's a plan. What is it? I don't know. But think about what a Hollow would want. According to the text, they went to the void deep when Aldrich put the yoke on. They didn't go dormant like the Riven, they went somewhere else. Somewhere the yoke can't reach. And they've been there for 400 years, awake and presumably waiting. What do you wait for 400 years, in a place where the yoke's authority can't touch you? She is quiet for almost a minute. Then, the yoke to be found again. By a compatible carrier. By someone who would activate it and announce to the entire sky realm that a new wielder exists. Someone the Hollow could, what? What do they do once the yoke is active? The Riven respond to the yoke. Their bodies obey whoever is wearing it. If the Hollow have been manipulating Kael into a position to get the yoke, to get it to a Hollow, then they could command the Riven. Not with Aldrich's original authority, which is encoded in the yoke's matrix and was keyed to his bloodline, but with the corrupted version. A forced signal. She sits down. A Hollow wearing the yoke could potentially override the bonded connection between the yoke and a compatible carrier if the compatible carrier was no longer alive. They look at each other. Kael's job is to get me killed and give the yoke to the Hollow, Ren says. That's the most elegant version of the plan, yes. Why not just take the yoke from me? Why not just kill me and take it? Because the yoke's bonding process is not instantly reversible. Killing the carrier immediately after bonding while the yoke is in the process of matrix locking to their blood creates a reversion state, which according to the oldest texts locks the yoke's signal to white noise for a minimum of 30 years. The Hollow would know this. They can't just kill you and take it. They need the bonding process to complete and then. She stops. And then kill me. Or find a way to transfer the bond to a Hollow carrier, which might be possible if the matrix is accessed through a specific. She stops again. She stands up. We need to leave the palace. What? Tonight? We need to leave the palace, we need to go somewhere Kale doesn't know about, and we need to figure out how to stop this before he figures out that we've figured out what he's doing. She is already moving. Kale knows the yoke was found. He knows the carrier is in the palace. He was in that council chamber. He knows it's you. He has maybe 24 hours before his hollow contact tells him the bonding process timeline and he starts moving. We have maybe 12 hours before he starts looking for us. Where do we go? We're in the middle of the capital. I know someone, she says. Come on. The someone Sarah knows is a woman named Commander Lisa Thorne. Former Warden Commander, specifically, who was retired from her position 8 years ago when Kale Drost decided she knew too much about military matters and organized a campaign that portrayed her as politically meddlesome and got her quietly removed from her command. She now runs a small private military training yard in the outer district of Thornwall and hates Kale Drost with an intensity that she keeps very carefully controlled because she also knows exactly how ruthless he is when he perceives a threat. Lisa Thorne is 49 years old. She is built like an oak that has survived multiple storms and has the expression of a person who has not been surprised by anything in approximately 15 years. When Sarah shows up at her door past midnight with a teenage farm boy carrying a glowing crown and tells her the Cloudborn are awake and the king's advisor is in communication with one of them and they need help, she looks at both of them for a very long moment and then says, "Come in. I'll put the fire on." She listens to everything. She does not interrupt. She examines the yoke at close range without touching it. She asks 2 questions at the end. How certain are they about Kale and what do they need? On how certain, Ren explains the directed signal he felt when he wore the yoke. He explains Kale's face in the council chamber. He explains the 11-year correspondence timeline that the signal implies. He is honest that he cannot prove any of it. What he has is a sensor impression from a magical artifact and a hunch about a man's expression. Lisa says, "I was Warden Commander for 12 years. Kale Drost pushed me out 8 years ago. He pushed me out because I was looking into a set of irregular resource transfers that I couldn't explain, specifically involving a certain class of high-frequency acoustic instruments that are not standard military equipment. I had an inquiry going and he killed it by killing my career." She looks at them. What you're describing about the signal through the cloud layer. If you needed to produce a narrow high-frequency signal strong enough to pierce a 3-mile atmospheric barrier, the instruments I found on the inventory sheet would do exactly that. I filed the inquiry 5 months before he had me removed. She believed before they walked in. She was just waiting for proof. What they need, as Sarah explains it, is 2 things. First, a safe location outside the palace where Ren can work with the yoke without Kale tracking the signal. Second, an honest military ear, someone currently serving, who can be trusted with this information and who has the authority to act if they need to move on Kale directly. On the safe location, Lisa has a property outside the city, a training site she uses for intensive sessions, 12 miles northeast. Off-road. Not registered to her name officially. Kale won't know about it. On the honest military ear, she knows exactly one person currently serving who is both trustworthy and high-ranking enough to matter. Warden Captain Elric Crane. Her former deputy. She says he has been walking a careful line under Kale's watch for 8 years, but he has not been corrupted and he has not been pushed out, and if anyone can be trusted with this, it is him. They spend 2 hours at Lisa's house making a plan. Ren listens. Sarah leads the conversation. Lisa provides the resources. Ren contributes the one thing the others can't, which is the ability to put the yoke on and get real-time information from the Sky Realm. He does this twice during the planning session, each time for less than 30 seconds, just reading the situation above the cloud layer. Each time he comes back he reports a small change. The gathered presences are denser. More of them arriving at the cloud layer edge. And the narrow signal from the palace district has changed in frequency, faster, more urgent, like someone typing a message very quickly. By the time they leave Lisa's house it is 3 in the morning. Sarah has changed into traveling clothes. Ren has a real coat and real boots that fit, sourced from Lisa's training ward supplies. They take 2 horses from Lisa's yard. They ride north toward the off-road property. Behind them, in the inner palace district, a light is burning in a private residence window. Kale Drost is awake. He is very carefully and very precisely sending a message upward through the cloud layer using an acoustic instrument that sounds, to the rare passerby who hears it in the night, like a very low note from a pipe organ. He is sending a message that says, "The carrier is in the palace. The yoke is bonded. Confirm transfer protocol. How long do I wait?" He waits 20 minutes for the response, which comes back as a different pattern of low notes that he decodes quickly. The response is, "You have 3 days. Then we come down." Kale folds his hands and thinks carefully about this. 3 days to locate the carrier, secure the yoke, and complete the transfer. 3 days before the Cloudborn descend. He does not know that the carrier is already gone. 12 miles northeast of Thornwall, at a training site that is 4 stone buildings around a practice yard, Ren starts to understand what he is actually holding. He has 24 hours before Kale starts a full palace search and realizes he and Sarah are gone. In those 24 hours, he needs to know what the yoke can do beyond the basic presence sensing. What authority it actually projects. Whether it works over distance. Whether it is directional. Whether it can be used without wearing it. These are not abstract curiosities. They are tactical questions, and Lisa Thorne asks them first, before any of the more abstract ones, because she is a soldier and soldiers work with what they have. Ren spends the first 2 hours sitting with the yoke in his hands, not wearing it, just existing in proximity to it, learning the faint version of the signal. He notices that without wearing it he can still get impressions. Less clear. More like echoes. But he can distinguish direction. He can tell roughly how far the gathered cloudborn are, distance in the sense of atmospheric layers above, and he can tell that there are now significantly more of them at the cloud layer edge than there were 12 hours ago. They are not descending. Not yet. But they are assembled. He puts it on for a focus session. The full contact experience feels entirely different now. The yoke hasn't changed, he has. Stripped of that initial shock, he slips into the connection effortlessly, picking out the individual presences with ease. This time, acting on a thought that has been brewing since the council chamber, he pushes beyond merely sensing them. Gathering his focus, he tries to speak. Not words. The yoke does not transmit language in any normal sense. It transmits intention. The way a direct gaze between two people can transmit hostility or friendliness or acknowledgement without a word. He focuses on the closest of the gathered presences, the largest, the one that feels like a fire rather than a torch, and he projects the yoke's signal at it. Not a command. Not yet. He doesn't even know if he can issue commands. He tries simply, "I know you are there." The response is immediate. It hits him like a wave of cold water. Not hostile. Not warm. Ancient. The presence turns its full attention on him, and the weight of that attention is physically staggering. He grabs the post beside him and holds on, but he doesn't take the yoke off. He holds on and he holds the contact. The presence examines him. He cannot read its thoughts. What he gets is impression, assessment, recognition, something like calculation, and beneath all of that, deep and patient and inevitable, the single most frightening thing he has ever felt from another consciousness. Anger. Not the quick anger of a provoked person. The slow, enormous, absolute anger of something that has been waiting to be angry for 400 years and has been perfectly patient about it until now. The kind of anger that does not rush because it knows with complete certainty that it will eventually get what it wants. He takes the yoke off. He sits on the ground. He breathes. Sarah crouches beside him. "What was that?" "The largest one," he says. "It's not asleep. It's been awake for a long time. And it is very, very angry." "Did you get anything else?" "Not exact. But the impression." He tries to find words for impression. It's going to come down. It isn't following orders or executing some grand plan. It's coming down simply because it has been waiting since the days of Aldrich, and there is finally nothing left to stop it. The yoke stops it. That's what the yoke is for. The yoke stops it if I use it. If I issue commands through it. He looks at the crown in his hands. "I don't know if I can do that. The presence sensing is passive. It comes through the yoke whether I direct it or not. But issuing an actual command, telling a being that size to stop, that's different. That's using the authority function. Can you try it?" He looks at her. "If I try it and it doesn't work, I will have announced to every cloudborn at the cloud layer that I am attempting to use authority against them. They will stop being carefully assembled above the cloud layer and they will start descending. And if you don't practice it before they come down, you try to use it under combat conditions for the first time." Ren thinks about this. "I need to try it on something smaller. A smaller presence. One at the edges. Not the big one." He puts the yoke on again. He goes carefully, deliberately, past the big fire that is the large presence. He goes to the edges of the gathering where the smaller individual torches cluster. He finds the smallest one he can identify. He focuses the yoke's signal. And he tries. The sensation is nothing like what he expected. He expected it to feel like shouting, projecting, pushing. It doesn't. It feels like remembering. Like the authority is something the yoke already contains, completely formed, and his job is not to generate it but to allow it through. Like a door. He's the door. The authority is the wind. He opens the door a crack. The small presence at the edge of the gathering stops. Not dramatically. It simply stops moving, which he hadn't even noticed it was moving until it stopped, and the stillness was absolute and specific. It stops the way things stop when they cannot continue regardless of whether they want to. Not persuasion. Not voluntary. The yoke's authority hits something biological and below conscious in the cloudborn structure and simply says, "Stop." And it stops. Ren closes the door. The presence starts moving again, immediately, and now it is not just moving but withdrawing fast, pulling back from the edge of the cloud layer to a distance that suggests it is extremely unsettled by what just happened. He takes the yoke off. He says, "It works." Lisa, who has been watching from across the yard, says, "On a small one." "On a small one," he agrees. "The big one is different. I don't know if the same technique scales." Lisa says, "You have 24 hours. Practice." So he does. For the rest of that day and into the night, Ren Ashfield practices with the Yoke of Heaven. He practices the authority function on progressively larger presences at the gathering's edges, trying to find where his range and capacity end. He practices the directional sensing. He practices holding the yoke's contact for longer periods without being destabilized by the volume of input. He learns things that no text recorded because no one after Aldrich has worn the yoke, and Aldrich apparently did not write an instruction manual. He learns that the authority function has a radius. He can extend it broadly over a wide area at low intensity or focus it narrowly on a single presence at high intensity. He learns that the void silver veins are temperature sensitive, they get warm against his skin when the authority function is active and cool down when it isn't. He learns that the yoke communicates with him through sensation rather than language, through the impression system, and that if he is patient and stays in contact without forcing it, the impressions build into something increasingly detailed. Not words, not images, but something closer to understanding. A slow translation. He also learns something he does not tell anyone immediately. He learns it near midnight, in the middle of a focused practice session where he is holding yoke contact longer than he has before, and the impression builds and builds until it crosses some threshold and becomes specific. Not just the large gathering. Not just the individual torches. Something below all of them. Something in the void deep that the hollow went into 400 years ago. He learned about the hollow from the book. He has been thinking about the hollow as one entity, the one corresponding with Kale. But sitting in contact with the yoke for a sustained period, he understands that the void deep is not a place with one inhabitant. It is a place with many. And the many in the void deep are not all hollow. Some of them are older than the hollow. Much older. And they are not waiting. They have been trying to come through. They have been trying to come through for 400 years, pushing against the boundary between the void deep and the sky realm, and what has been holding the boundary closed is not the yoke. The yoke holds the riven. The boundary of the void deep is held by something else. Something built into the physical structure of the sky realm. A seal. And the seal is being eroded. Not from outside. From inside. Something inside the void deep has been eating it slowly, patiently, for a long time. And when it finally breaks through, what comes out is not cloud-born. Not hollow. Something that does not have a name in any human text because nothing that has ever seen it has survived to write it down. Ren takes the yoke off and sits in the dark and breathes. The hollow corresponding with Kale. Their plan that involves getting the yoke and controlling the riven. He had been thinking about this as a power grab. A political play. A faction within the cloud-born wanting control. But it is not that. The hollow below the cloud layer, the one sending signals to Kale, it doesn't want the yoke to command the riven. It wants the riven commanded out of the way. Cleared from around the void deep boundary so that when the seal breaks there is nothing standing between what comes out and the human world below. The hollow is not trying to take over the human world. It is trying to open a door. And whatever is behind the door has promised it something in return. He lies on his back in the practice yard and looks up at the cloud layer and thinks, the plan is not what I thought it was. The plan is worse. And Kale Drost has been building it for 11 years without knowing what the plan actually is, because the hollow told him what he wanted to hear and kept the actual objective for itself. And Ren needs to figure out how to stop not just the cloudborn from coming down but the void deep from opening, and he needs to do it before Kale finds them and takes the yoke, and he has no army and no authority and no plan. What he has is the yoke. And the anger of the large presence above the cloud layer. And an idea about that anger that is either brilliant or the worst thing he has ever considered. The morning of the second day, everything goes wrong at once. 3 things happen in rapid sequence. First, Kale Drost discovers Sarah and Ren are gone from the palace. He knows it by sunrise because the palace has exactly the kind of staff that reports unusual departures to a man who has spent 15 years making himself the person those reports go to. He knows they left with horses. He knows which direction. He issues a quiet alert through his private network of informants, not through official channels, because official channels involve the Warden command structure and he does not have full control of it. Second, Warden Captain Elric Crane receives a message from Lisa Thorne through a coded messenger system she established before her retirement for exactly this kind of contingency. The message is 12 sentences. It contains enough specific, verifiable detail that Crane reads it twice and then sits very still for a long time before responding. He has spent 8 years watching Kale and suspecting and having no evidence and doing nothing. He now has evidence. His response is, I'm coming. Third, the cloud layer above Velmore breaks open. Not everywhere. Not all at once. A single point. 40 miles northeast of Thornwall, roughly where Ren and Sarah are. A tear in the cloud layer 3 miles wide, gray-white edges pulling back like a wound, and through the tear, descending on winds that have no natural source because the sky realm wind does not follow normal atmospheric rules, comes something that has not been seen in the human world in 400 years. A cloud-born warrior. Not the full gathering. One, coming down through the torn cloud layer like a test shot, a scout, a declaration. And it is not small. It is 40 feet tall, its form roughly humanoid but massive, its skin the color of storm clouds lit from inside, its eyes luminous silver white, its clothing made of compressed air matter that moves like armor plate. It descends slowly, deliberately, and when it reaches approximately 2,000 feet altitude it stops. Hangs. Looks down at the human lands below. It is not the large one. Ren knows this the moment it comes through. He isn't wearing the yoke, but simply resting his hand against it makes the impression immediate. This is a Riven warrior from the assembled gathering. It didn't descend by choice or under a formal command, but was instead driven down by something above it, a direct reaction to the hollow signal from below sweeping through the gathering and forcing this single Riven to respond. The hollow is testing him, testing the carrier, seeing if he will act. Ren looks at Sarah. He says, "I need to go toward it." She stares at him. What? If I run from it, the hollow interprets that as the carrier being unable to use the yoke, which tells them they can push harder. Send more. If I go toward it and use the authority function, I demonstrate that the yoke is active and the carrier knows how to use it. What does demonstrating that accomplish except making you a target? It tells the Riven the yoke is active. All of them. Not just the hollow's signal. The yoke's authority signal is broadcast over the whole gathering. It doesn't just command the one I focus on. It talks to all of them. In their biology. In the deep recognition system that knows what the yoke is. He looks at her. I think if I use the authority function at full capacity, I can push the whole gathering back. Not permanently. Not for 400 years like Aldrich. But long enough. Long enough for what? Long enough for us to deal with Kale and find the actual source of the problem, which is not the Riven coming down but the void deep boundary breaking. Lisa, who has been listening, says, if you go toward it on horseback, you are a 17-year-old boy on a horse approaching a 40-foot divine warrior. What is your actual plan for not dying in the first 30 seconds? Ren says, the yoke. The moment I put it on and direct authority at it, it stops. I know that works. I practiced it yesterday. You practiced it on distant presences through a 3-mile cloud layer. This one is right there. I know. Lisa looks at him for a long moment. Then she says, I'll ride with you. He shakes his head. You can't do anything if I'm wearing the yoke. The Cloudborn won't respond to anyone else. You'd be on a horse next to a 40-foot killing machine with no means of influence. I'm not going for the Cloudborn. I'm going so that when this goes wrong, someone is there. She goes to the stable. Get your horse. They ride toward the descended Cloudborn. Sarah watches them go from the practice yard, and she does not try to come, because she knows the tactical logic and she has accepted it in the way that extremely controlled people accept things they hate, which is with perfect composure and a white-knuckled grip on the fence post in front of them. The descended Cloudborn watches them come. From 2 miles out Ren can see it in the morning sky, hovering against the clouds, enormous, silver-eyed, completely still. From 1 mile he can see its face, which is not human but not inhuman in the way he expected from the book's drawings. It has features. It has depth behind the eyes. It is ancient and powerful and a warrior, and it is also, unmistakably, thinking. Looking at him. Assessing. Not yet attacking because nothing about the protocol of its world involves attacking something this small without being told to. From half a mile Ren puts the yoke on. The contact is immediate and overwhelming. Not because of the Cloudborn in front of him, which is a single presence, enormous but singular. Because the full gathering above the cloud layer is suddenly, completely present in his awareness. The weight of all of them at once, like standing under a sky full of enormous watching faces. He stays on his horse. He breathes. He does not close his eyes because closing his eyes under full yoke contact in a situation like this is how you fall off a horse. He focuses on the descended Cloudborn. He finds it in the signal, the specific torch of it, close and large and aware. He opens the door. He lets the authority through. Not a crack this time. He opens it fully. The authority signal hits the descended Cloudborn like a physical wave. It stops. Its silver eyes lock on Ren across the half-mile of open farmland. And for 1 second, one absolutely suspended second, it resists. He can feel it resist. Its biology pulling against the signal, the Riven warrior's pride and fury fighting the deep instruction embedded in the yoke's frequency. It resists like a bridge resists a flood, completely and structurally, and then the flood finds one crack and the bridge comes down. The Cloudborn does not fall. It simply stops resisting. Its posture changes. Its enormous frame, which has been angled forward in the instinctive combat-ready position, straightens. Then it moves backward, upward, back toward the tear in the cloud layer. Ren does not stop there. He extends the authority, broadcasting now, wide and total, the way he figured out yesterday you could go broad over a wide area. He broadcasts it up through the cloud layer at the full gathering and he says, in the language that has no words but every Cloudborn understands, the thing that the Yoke has been saying since Aldrich. Stop. Return. You do not come through. The gathering does not scatter. It does not flee. But it moves back. Every presence in the gathering pulls away from the cloud layer edge, the way a tide pulls away from the shore before a wave. Retreating to a higher altitude. The cloud layer closes over the tear. Ren takes the yoke off and falls sideways off his horse. Lisa catches him before he hits the ground. He is not unconscious. He is close to it. Full broadcast through the yoke at that scale, with that many presences in range, is like using every muscle in your body at maximum intensity simultaneously. His hands are shaking. His vision has narrowed to a central tunnel. But he is upright and breathing and the sky above them is solid gray-white again, sealed. Lisa helps him back on the horse. She says nothing. They ride back. Sarah is waiting in the practice yard with an expression that confirms she spent the last 20 minutes experiencing something extremely unpleasant. She looks at Ren. She looks at the yoke in his hands. She says, "Did it work?" "Temporarily," he says. They pull back. But the hollow is still down here. Kale is still moving. And the void deep boundary is eroding. Pushing the riven back buys us time. It does not fix the actual problem. She nods once. Elric Crane is an hour away. He got Lisa's message. Warden Captain Elric Crane is 40 years old. He has the physique of a man who has been a soldier for 22 years and the eyes of a man who has spent 8 years watching something he hated and being unable to stop it. He arrives with 6 wardens he trusts with his actual life, not just his career, and he rides into Lisa's property and dismounts and looks at Ren and Sarah and says, "All right, what do we do?" This is the meeting that matters. Not the council chamber. Not the king. This is the meeting with the person who can actually move. Ren lays it out. All of it. The yoke and its functions. The void deep and the boundary erosion. The hollow corresponding with Kale. Kale's plan and what the hollow is actually using it for. The riven gathering above the cloud layer and the temporary pushback he just accomplished. He lays it out in a direct, logical sequence and he does not soften any part of it. Crane listens without interrupting. When Ren finishes, Crane says, "The king." Sarah says, "My father deferred to Kale in the council chamber. He will do it again unless Kale is removed from his position before we go back." Crane says, "To remove Kale I need evidence that will hold in front of the Warden Tribunal. The council chamber testimony of a runaway parcel laborer and the king's daughter who is known for studying forbidden mythology does not hold." Ren says, "I can take the yoke and confirm the signal direction to Kale's residence. While in contact I can specifically trace the hollow signal to its source point in the city. That's a precise physical location I can identify. If Crane can get to that location with a search unit, the signal device will be there. The high-frequency acoustic instrument that produces the cloud layer communication. That's a physical, tangible piece of evidence." Crane says, "I can take a search unit to that location on my own authority as a captain in the active Warden Corps. I don't need the tribunal for a search. I need it for arrest. But if the instrument is there, the arrest follows automatically." They agree. This is the plan. Ren traces the signal source precisely. Crane takes a unit to the location. They find the instrument. They go to the king before Kale can respond. Ren puts the yoke on. He reaches for the hollow signal, not the riven gathering above, but the narrow downward line that the hollow has been sending. He has only touched it briefly before. Now he follows it. He tracks it down through the cloud layer, down through the atmosphere, down into the city signal, and he traces it to a specific location in Thornwall. Not just the palace district. A specific building. A specific room. He gets a sharp, painful spike of presence from whatever the receiving device is, the acoustic instrument on the other end, and it is at a location he can describe precisely in terms of direction and distance from the city gate. He takes the yoke off. He describes the location to Crane. Crane says, "That's the address of Kale's private residence." "Exactly." He looks at his 6 wardens. "Saddle up. We ride now." The 6 wardens ride. Crane rides with them. Lisa insists on going and no one argues because Lisa Thorne is not the kind of person you argue with about going into a fight. Sarah stays with Ren at the property, per plan. They wait. They wait for 2 hours. It feels longer. Then a rider comes back, one of Crane's wardens, riding hard, and he arrives in the yard with a face that says the news is mixed. "We found the instrument," he says. "Exactly where you said. A full array, actually 11 separate components in a basement room that looks like it's been operational for at least a decade." He pauses. Captain Crane has taken Kale into custody. Sarah closes her eyes briefly. And the complication? The warden says, Kale was already sending a signal when we arrived. We got in before he could stop. But he had already started. We don't know what he sent. We don't know if the message completed. Ren already knows. He can feel it through the yoke even without wearing it. The faint impression of the signal, the hollow's energy above, has changed. It is not the careful narrow correspondence line anymore. It is broad, bright, urgent. Whatever Kale sent was a go signal. He puts the yoke on. Above the cloud layer, the gathering is moving. Not retreating to higher altitude. Moving toward the cloud layer. All of them. Not just one scout. All of them. And the hollow signal from above is no longer communicating downward. It is communicating sideways into the gathering, directing them, pushing them toward the cloud layer edge with an intensity that overrides his earlier pushback. The Riven warriors, whose biology knows the yoke but whose immediate instructions are coming from a hollow authority that has been working on them from above for decades, are caught between the yoke's authority and the hollow's directives. Most of them are responding to the hollow. Because the hollow is close and real and present. Because he is one human kid on the ground 3 miles below them and his signal is not yet as clear and certain as the 400 years of careful manipulation from their own kind. He extends the authority broadcast. Maximum width. Maximum intensity. He pushes it up through the cloud layer the way he did before the tear. It slows them. It does not stop them. He pushes harder. The void silver veins against his skin are hot. His nose is bleeding. His vision is white-edged. He pushes harder. The gathering slows further. Some of the smaller riven at the edges stop entirely. But the core, the ones directly influenced by the hollow, keep moving. Toward the cloud layer. He can feel them pushing against his authority signal the way the first descended warrior pushed against it. But there are dozens of them and they are braced against each other and the hollow's direction and they are going to come through. He tries something different. Instead of broadcasting wide, he narrows the signal to a single target. The large one. The fire presence. The largest of the riven, the one he felt on the first night, the one burning with 400 years of held anger. He narrows the yoke's beam to that single massive presence and he doesn't project authority at it. He does something different. He reaches. He feels for the impression beneath the anger. The personality. The consciousness. And he speaks. Not a command. A question. He asks, why are you coming down? The presence turns on him instantly. The full weight of it. Not for the first time but more focused than before, because now there is something specific being asked and consciousness responds to specificity differently than to authority. The impression that comes back is not in words. It is a dump of raw emotion, experience, reality, so vast and so fast that his brain can only catch pieces of it. But the pieces are enough. The large presence. This great riven warrior that has spent 400 years sleeping in the deep sky is not coming down for the hollow's reasons. It is not following the hollow's commands. It is coming down because the void deep seal is cracking and it can feel what is on the other side and it is not going to stay above the cloud layer while the void deep tears open below it. It is coming down to fight. Not humans. What is coming through the void deep? It is coming down to help. Ren sits on the ground with the yoke on his head and blood running down his lip and his whole body shaking and he processes this. The large riven is not the enemy. The hollow is not the enemy. The enemy is what the hollow let in. What the hollow made a deal with in the void deep 400 years ago when it went down there to escape the yoke. The thing in the void deep that has been slowly eating the seal. The thing that promised the hollow freedom from the yoke's authority in exchange for opening the door. The hollow made a deal with something and it does not know what it actually agreed to. It thinks it made a political alliance. It made a feeding arrangement. He takes the yoke off. He stands up. Sarah is beside him with a cloth for his nosebleed which he takes without comment. He says, I need to go up. Into the sky realm. She says, repeat that. The riven are coming down because the void deep seal is breaking and they want to fight whatever comes through. The hollow has been manipulating the situation to clear the riven away from the boundary so the seal breaks without opposition. But the riven knows something is wrong. He looks at the cloud layer above. The only thing that can stop this without a full war between the Cloudborn and the human world is if the Riven understand that the Hollow has been deceiving them, that what they're being directed toward is not reclaiming the Sky Realm from the Yoke's authority but opening a door to something that will consume everything. And you think you can communicate that to them by going up. I think the large one will hear me. I spoke to it just now. I asked it why it was coming down and it answered. It's not a mindless force. Thinks. It makes assessments. If I go up and put the yoke on in direct proximity to the large Riven, close enough for full bilateral communication, not just signal impression but actual exchange, then I can show it what the Hollow's actual plan is. And if the large Riven understands it and opposes it, then the Riven don't fight the Hollow's proxy war. They fight the Void Deep. Yes. She looks at him. How do you go up? The mountain pass Aldrich used doesn't exist anymore. The cloud layer is 3 miles up. You can't climb 3 miles of air. No. He looks at the cloud layer. Then back at her. But when the riven come down they'll tear open the cloud layer. It'll happen in the next few hours unless I do something. And when it tears I can go up through the tear. She stares at him. You want to go up through a tear in the cloud layer created by dozens of descending divine warriors, in the middle of a war between the cloud-born factions, carrying the only thing that can stop the war, as a 17-year-old with no weapons and no backup. Yes. That is the most insane thing I have ever heard. Do you have a better idea? She is silent for 2 seconds. Then, I'm coming with you. Sarah? I read every account of the Sky Realm that exists in the Royal Archives. I know the structural geography. I know the air matter formation patterns. I know the approximate locations of the old cloud-born architecture. If you go up there without knowledge of the physical environment, you will be completely disoriented in 30 seconds. If you go up with me, you have a navigator. He looks at her. If something happens to you up there, we don't get a second chance. The two of us together is better than one of you alone. And before you say I'm not a fighter, neither are you. What you have is the yoke. What I have is everything else. Together we have a complete set. He thinks for exactly 3 seconds. Okay. She goes. She is gone for 10 minutes and comes back with a pack. She has been preparing since the first night, he realizes. There are things in the pack that she sourced specifically for a Sky Realm visit. Treated leather for the cold, concentrated food, a specific kind of lamp that uses compressed oil instead of wick because wick doesn't burn at altitude, navigation instruments calibrated for 3-dimensional orientation. She has been preparing for this since before she met him. He asks, when exactly did you start packing for the Sky Realm? She says, when I found the records about the cloud layer tear in the archive 3 months ago. When I realized the Cloudborn were waking up and someone was going to have to go up eventually. She adjusts the pack. I was planning to do it alone. I'm glad I don't have to. He looks at her and thinks that she is possibly the most terrifyingly prepared person he has ever met. He thinks this is the best possible asset to have right now. He picks up his coat with the yoke inside and they go. Crane and Lisa return from the city. Kale is in warden custody. The instrument array is seized and documented. Crane has already sent writers to the palace with a formal report that triggers the warden tribunal process automatically, meaning the king cannot simply defer to Kale anymore because the tribunal is a procedurally independent body that the king can't shut down. The machinery is in motion. On the political side they are as secure as they can be. The sky side is a different situation. Crane looks up at the cloud layer and says, is it my imagination or is that moving? It is not his imagination. The cloud layer is churning now, not the gentle vertical oscillation of the last 6 weeks but active, driven movement, the whole 3-mile-high mass rotating slowly around a central point 40 miles northwest that suggests a large pressure differential being created from above. The riven are close to the boundary, close to coming through. Ren says to Crane, when the cloud layer tears, we go through. After that, do not let anyone follow us. Whatever comes through the tear from above, use the wardens to direct people away from the descent zone. But do not try to fight the riven. They are not the enemy right now, and if anyone attacks them it gives the hollow exactly the conflict it needs. Crane says, what should we actually do? Ren says, keep Kale contained. Keep the king informed. And wait for us to come back. Crane looks at 2 teenagers standing in a practice yard preparing to go up through a cloud layer into a war between ancient divine beings. He says, is there any chance this works? Lisa, who has been observing quietly, says, that boy pushed a gathering of Cloudborn back from a cloud layer breach single-handed 30 minutes ago. There is a chance. The cloud layer tears. The tear opens at approximately 10 miles north of the practice yard and it is massive, 3 miles across, the gray-white edges pulling back rapidly to reveal the sky above. Not the sky anyone knows. Above the cloud layer the sky is different. It is not just bluer, more open. It is geometrically different. There are things floating in it. At 20,000 feet up, visible from the ground as distant dark shapes against the brighter upper sky, are the air matter formations. The floating geography of the cloud-born world. Mountains that have no ground beneath them. Plateaus of compressed mineral-dense air sitting in stable suspension. And from between these formations, descending, numerous and enormous and lit from inside with a pale silver luminescence, are the riven. They come down slowly, deliberately, not like an attack, like a tide. And the first ones to come through the tear, reaching the lower atmosphere where the air is human breathable, stop at 1,000 feet and look down. Not at the ground. At Ren. Because the yoke is already on his head. He is standing in the field below the tear and the yoke is on and he is broadcasting the authority signal at its widest and highest and most precise that he can manage, and what he is broadcasting is not a command. It is a question. The same question he asked the large presence 30 minutes ago. Why are you coming down? The descended Riven do not stop. But they slow further. Their silver eyes, each one the size of a wagon wheel at this range, track the source of the authority signal. Track him. And the impressions coming back through the yoke from the closest ones are not the pure anger he expected. They are complex. Urgent. Not all the same. Some of them are angry. Some of them are confused. Some of them feel something that is remarkably close to desperate. The large one is not through the tear yet. It is still above the cloud layer. But it is close. Sarah is beside him. She has a rope attached to a grapple. This is not as insane as it sounds given the context. The plan is to use one of the descended Riven as a lift. Specifically, to ask one of them, through the yoke, to take them up through the tear. This is either an extremely sophisticated diplomatic move or the most ridiculous idea ever conceived. Ren finds the Riven closest to the tear edge, hovering at 800 feet, which is the lowest descent altitude so far. He focuses the yoke's signal at it. Not authority. Recognition. Acknowledgement. I know what you are. I know why you're here. I am not your enemy. The closest Riven stares at him. He can see its face at this range. It is enormous and the architecture of it is not human, but it has the same fundamental quality that a face has, the quality of an interior life made exterior. It stares at him and he stares back, and through the yoke, he gives it the most important impression he can project. I need to go up. I need to speak to the largest one. Let me through. The Riven stares at him for what feels like an eternity. Then it reaches a hand down. A cloud-born hand at this scale is the size of a small boat. It descends toward the ground slowly, flat, palm up. An offering. Or a request. Ren looks at Sarah. She looks at him. They climb onto the palm. And they go up through the tear in the sky. The experience of ascending through the cloud layer at speed on the palm of a cloud-born warrior is not something that the human nervous system has any prior reference for. The cloud layer itself, from inside, is a dense turbulent mass of electrical charge and microice and compressed water vapor, and the passage through it is approximately 10 seconds of absolute sensory overload, white and cold and crackling, and then they are through. Above the cloud layer. The sky realm. Sarah takes a breath that is not quite a gasp. Ren takes the same breath. They are standing on the palm of a 40-foot cloud-born warrior 3 miles above the human world, and around them, in every direction, are the structures and formations and beings that have not been seen by human eyes in 400 years. It is enormous. That is the first and only word that applies. Everything is on a scale that makes the human world below feel like a miniature. The floating stone formations rise in columns and plateaus and arching bridges of compressed air matter, and on every flat surface there are structures. Architecture. Buildings that would be mountains if they were on the ground. And in the spaces between the formations, along the arching bridges, around the massive columns, are the Riven. Not just dozens. Hundreds. The gathering is far larger than Ren estimated from the signal impressions below. He keeps the yoke on. He keeps broadcasting. And through the yoke's expanded range, now that he is in the sky realm itself above the insulating mass of the cloud layer, the signal is clearer than he has ever experienced it. The individual presences are sharp and specific. He can feel each one distinctly. And what he feels from the hundreds of Riven gathered around him is not the hostility he prepared for. It is fear. They are afraid. These ancient divine warriors who could pick up a castle and throw it, these beings whose existence in the pre-Aldrich era caused entire kingdoms to live in caves, they are afraid. And they are afraid of the same thing. Below them. Below the sky realm. The pressure from the void deep boundary. He can feel it from here, much more clearly than he could from the ground. A grinding, massive, inevitable pressure coming from below the sky realm's floor, like something very large pressing against a wall that has been getting thinner for a very long time. He finds the large presence. It is here, close, on a formation platform 200 meters away, at the same altitude, standing and looking at him with those silver eyes that he has been feeling through the yoke for 2 days as the most intense presence in the gathering. He asks to be taken to it. The Riven carrying them moves. They cross the 200 meters. They are set down on the platform surface. The large Riven is enormous even by cloud-born standards. It is not 40 feet. It is 60, maybe more. Old in a way that the others are not, the age visible not in any physical decline but in a quality of presence, a density of self, like something that has existed long enough to become very specifically and permanently itself. It looks at them with those silver-white eyes, and through the yoke Ren gets the full weight of its attention, the same weight he felt from 3 miles below, and this time he does not grab anything to keep from falling. He stands in it and he holds it because this is the only way this works. The large Riven speaks. Not in any language Ren knows. But the yoke translates in impressions, building the meaning gradually, and what he gets is, you are the carrier. You drove us back. He projects back through the yoke. Yes. But I didn't know why you were coming down then. I don't know. You know? The void deep. The seal is breaking. You are coming down to fight what comes through. The large ribbon is still for a long moment. Then, how do you know this? I felt it through the yoke. I felt you asking me why. I listened to the answer. Another long stillness. The impression that comes back is not simple. It is layered, cautious, something almost like surprise at being listened to. After a moment, there is one of the hollow here. It has been directing our gathering, telling us that the carrier had called us down, that the carrier was using the old crown to demand our submission as Aldrich did. We were gathering to refuse. Ren processes this. The hollow told the Riven that Ren was summoning them down against their will. It told the Riven that the yoke was being used to dominate them. It told them he was the enemy so they would come down ready to fight him rather than pay attention to the void deep behind them. He says through the yoke, the hollow lied to you. I am not summoning you. I was pushing you back. Because I didn't know you were trying to come down to fight. And now I know. And I need to tell you something about the hollow and why it told you that lie. What follows is the most complex communicative exchange of Ren's life. Through the yoke's impression system, inadequate for language but capable of conveying truth in a way that goes below words, he shows the large Riven everything he knows. The hollows deal with something in the void deep. The use of Kale Drost. The plan to clear the Riven away from the boundary by directing them down to the human world in a war, while the boundary breaks behind them. The thing in the void deep that the hollow made a deal with. What it is and what it wants and what it offered the hollow in return. The large Riven's presence, which has been steady and massive and controlled through all of this, goes very still when he reaches the last part. The stillness of something processing something catastrophic. Then, where is the hollow now? Ren scans through the yoke. He finds the hollow's signal. It is not above. It is below the sky realm floor. It is at the void deep boundary. It is there now, alone, at the boundary, and the seal is very close to breaking. When it breaks, the hollow expects to be received on the other side as a deal partner, an ally, someone who fulfilled its end of the arrangement. It has spent 400 years in the void deep with the thing on the other side and it genuinely believes the deal is real. He shows this to the large Riven. The large Riven turns and looks at the sky realm floor. There is a tremor. Distant, deep, coming from below. The air matter formations shake faintly. The Riven gathering goes very still, all at once, all hundreds of them at the tremor. They recognize it. The seal is breaking. The large Riven looks at Ren. At the yoke. The impression it projects is the most direct and most important one of the entire exchange. It says, can you use the crown to seal the void deep? He has been thinking about this since the night he first learned about the void deep from the yoke's extended contact. He has turned the question over and tested it from every angle he knows. The answer he has arrived at is, maybe. Possibly. The yoke's authority functions on cloudborn biology. It sends a signal that cloudborn recognize and respond to at a level below conscious choice. The thing in the void deep is not cloudborn. He does not know if the yoke signal can touch it. He does not know if the thing in the void deep has a biology that the yoke's frequency can affect. But he knows one thing. The void deep boundary is a structural feature of the sky realm. If the Riven can physically reinforce the boundary structure while the yoke's signal interferes with the thing on the other side, the two effects together might be enough to close what is opening. He tells the large Riven, I don't know if the crown reaches the thing in the void deep. But I will try. And I need you. The large Riven is quiet for a moment. Then it holds out its hand. Not a request this time. A partnership. Then we go down together. The sky realm floor is not what he imagined. He imagined something hard and flat. It is not. It is a zone of extreme pressure differential, where the stable high atmosphere physics of the sky realm transitions downward into the turbulent boundary of the cloud layer and below. It is visible as a shimmer in the air, a place where the light bends wrong, where looking down gives you a sensation of wrongness that is not optical but physical, something the body recognizes as a boundary even when the eyes can't process it cleanly. The hollow is here. It is not 40 feet tall like the Riven. It is different. Smaller but older. Its form is less solid, more like condensed air than flesh, and it glows with a light that is not the silver white of the Riven but something darker, more amber. It is standing at the exact point where the void deep boundary is thinnest, and it is working. Its hands are moving over the boundary surface in a pattern that he understands, through the yoke, as a deliberate weakening. It has been doing this for a very long time. This is not something it started today. And through the boundary, pressuring from the other side, pressing against the thinning membrane with a patience that is absolute and a strength that is simply enormous, is the thing from the void deep. Ren cannot see it. He can only feel it through the yoke, and what he feels is not cloud-born and is not human and does not have the structure of a consciousness that he can read or communicate with. It is a force. An appetite. Old and complete and entirely without concern for anything except what it wants, which is through. The hollow becomes aware of them. It turns. It sees the large Riven. It sees Ren with the yoke on his head. Its reaction is a complex impression of shock and anger and something under both of those that takes Ren a moment to identify, guilt. Old, buried, never examined guilt. He says, through the yoke, to the hollow, you know what you let in. The hollow says nothing. Through the yoke's impression system, its response is complex and tangled and very, very loud. Denial. Justification. Fear. And under all of it, yes, buried so deep that the hollow itself may not have fully examined it, knowledge. It has always known. From the moment it made the deal in the void deep, 400 years ago, it knew what it was dealing with. But it wanted what it was promised more than it feared what it was enabling. Ren does not have time for this. The boundary is cracking. He can hear it, physically hear it, a sound like deep ice breaking, resonant and enormous, coming from below the sky realm floor. He has maybe minutes. He looks at the large riven. He projects, hold the boundary. Physical reinforcement. Use your mass to press against the boundary surface from this side. Every riven here. As much physical pressure as you can put on it. The large riven nods. It turns and begins issuing commands to the gathered riven around them in the sky realm. Hundreds of massive beings begin moving toward the boundary zone. They kneel at the edge of the sky realm floor and press their enormous bodies down against the shimmer of the boundary, and the effect is immediate. The pressure from below lessens slightly. Not enough, but slightly. Now Ren's part. He reaches through the yoke. He reaches down. Below the riven pressing at the boundary. Below the boundary membrane itself. Into the void deep. He reaches for the thing on the other side. The force. The appetite. He tries to find something in it that the yoke's authority can connect with. He tries every frequency he knows. Every approach he has practiced. He reaches and the thing presses against the boundary from below and he finds nothing. No biology. No signal receptor. No structure that the yoke recognizes or can address. He stops. Thinks. The yoke works on cloudborne biology. The thing in the void deep is not cloudborne. But the hollow is. And the hollow made a deal with it. The hollow is the interface. The hollow opened the first crack in the boundary, centuries ago, by being present in the void deep and creating a point of contact between cloudborne biology and the void deep force. The hollow is the conductor. He turns the yoke's authority on the hollow. Not gently. Not as communication. Full authority. The yoke opens up everything it has and says, in the language that goes below conscious choice, stop what you are doing. Move away from the boundary. Cease contact. The hollow resists. It is older than most of the riven and its biology is different and the authority signal hits it wrong, scrapes and slides. But it does not completely slide off. The yoke finds the hook in the hollow structure, the deep below consciousness receiver that all cloudborne have, and it presses. The hollow's hands stop moving over the boundary. It tries to start again. He pushes harder. The yoke is blazing against his skin, the void silver veins are burning hot. He can feel blood dripping from his nose and both ears and he does not stop. He pushes the full authority of the yoke into the hollow's deep biology and he says, stop. And close what you opened. The hollow fights it for 20 seconds that feel like 20 years. And then, slowly, hating every moment, its body responding to a signal it cannot override, it begins to close what it opened. It takes its hands, which have been working to thin the boundary, and it begins to work in reverse. Not thinning. Thickening. Rebuilding the membrane from the cloudborne side, which is the only side that can be worked from, the void deep side being pure pressure and void force with no structural agency. The hollow rebuilds. The boundary thickens. The riven press down from above. The pressure from below intensifies as the thing in the void deep realizes what is happening and pushes harder, but now there are two reinforcing forces against it, the physical weight of hundreds of riven and the hollow actively rebuilding what it spent centuries destroying, and the boundary holds. And then, because something needs to be the final seal, because the boundary needs to close permanently and not just hold temporarily, the large riven does something that Ren did not anticipate and does not ask for. It reaches out and it touches the yoke. Not to take it. Not to use it. It extends one enormous finger and it makes contact with the void silver veins and the moment it does, the yoke's signal doubles. The cloudborne blood in the yoke matrix, Aldrich's bloodline, Ren's diluted lineage, and the direct full cloudborne contact of the large riven, all three resonating simultaneously through the void silver, produces a signal of such total authority that every cloudborne in range stops completely. The hollow stops. The gathered riven stop. Even the large riven stops, its hands still touching the yoke, its own body responding to the enhanced signal. And the void deep boundary slams shut. The sound is enormous. A deep bass concussion that travels up through the sky realm floor and through every structure in the sky realm and down through the cloud layer and into the human world below, where every person within 40 miles feels it in their chest and looks up at the same time. The shimmer at the sky realm floor is gone. The boundary is solid. The pressure from below has stopped. In the sudden silence, Ren is on his knees. He does not remember going to his knees. The yoke is still on his head but it is cool now, the void silver going to its minimum glow. His entire body aches. His ears are ringing. But he is upright and conscious and the seal is closed. The large riven withdraws its hand from the yoke. The hollow is on the sky realm floor 50 feet away, still and silent, looking at nothing. Through the yoke Ren can still feel it. The guilt has stopped being buried. It is the entire surface. 400 years of buried guilt, now exposed, is a very heavy thing. He does not project authority at it. He does not project anything. He just lets it feel what it feels. Sarah crouches beside him. Are you alive? He says, technically. She says, you look terrible. He says, thank you for coming. She looks at the sealed boundary and the hundreds of still riven and the guilty hollow and the yoke cooling on his head and she says, is it done? The seal is done. The rest. He looks up at the large riven, which is looking down at him with those silver eyes. The rest is a conversation. The conversation between Ren Ashfield, the large riven warrior, Sarah Velmore, and the hollow takes the better part of 3 hours in the sky realm where the time passes differently. Ren wears the yoke throughout, using it not for authority but for translation, keeping the impression exchange open and bilateral and honest. Sarah contributes the historical knowledge. The large riven, whose name translated through the yoke's impression system into something like Old Stone that moves, communicates through Ren as intermediary. Here is what comes out of it. The riven do not want to come down. They have not wanted to come down since the original war. The original war, which in human historical records is cast as the Cloudborn attacking and Aldrich defending, was more complicated than that. It was a conflict that started over the Void Deep boundary and what to do about it. The Cloudborn knew 400 years ago that something was in the Void Deep and that it wanted through. The Riven wanted to seal it permanently. The Hollow, who had been studying the Void Deep for centuries, believed they could communicate with it and reach an arrangement. The disagreement became a war. Humans got caught in the middle. Aldrich, with the yoke, didn't end the war by defeating the Cloudborn. He ended it by forcing a ceasefire that both Riven and Hollow were, in different ways, not finished with. The Hollow went into the Void Deep to pursue its plan. The Riven retreated to the deep sky to wait it out, believing eventually the Hollow would realize its mistake. They waited 400 years. They were right. The Hollow made the deal, kept the deal, spent 400 years enabling what it thought was an arrangement, and only now, standing at the boundary it rebuilt under the yoke's authority, does it fully acknowledge that the thing it dealt with was never going to keep any arrangement. The Void Deep Force doesn't make deals. It waits. It is patient. It was waiting before the Cloudborn existed. It will wait longer than the Cloudborn exist if it has to. The Hollow's deal was a lie told to a being willing to hear it. This is what the large Riven says to the Hollow, through Ren, through the yoke, in the sky realm above the closed boundary. This is what it says: you have spent 400 years in the Void Deep. You know now that you were deceived. What do you choose to do with the time remaining to you? The Hollow does not answer immediately. When it does, the impression is simple. Exhausted. Old in a way that is not noble patience but 4 centuries of a mistake finally fully admitted. It says, the same thing you are doing. Keeping the seal. Old Stone that moves says, then come up. You are Cloudborn. The Void Deep is closed. Come back to the sky realm. This is not a small moment. Ren watches it through the yoke's impression system and even the filtered version of it is enormous. 400 years of exile, chosen and self-imposed and carried as both pride and prison, ending in an offer of return from the one Ren would have expected least to make it. The large Riven, burning with ancient anger, offering a hand to the being whose choices caused 4 centuries of catastrophe. The Hollow looks at the sky realm around it, at the formations and the Riven and the bright upper sky. It has been in the Void Deep for so long that the light here is something it visibly adjusts to. It steps forward onto the sky realm floor fully, away from the boundary. The other Riven part to let it through. It goes, slowly, toward one of the lower formations. The other Cloudborn watch it go. No one follows. No one stops it. It finds a ledge and sits on it and looks out at the upper sky with the expression, filtered through the yoke's impression system, of someone who is going to need a very long time before they are ready for any of the next steps. But who is at least in the right place. Sarah says, what happens now? The Riven are all awake. The yoke is in the sky realm. We are 3 miles above the human world. The cloud layer is torn in at least one place. None of this is a stable situation. Old Stone that moves looks at her. Through the yoke, Ren relays the question. The Riven leader's response is complex and takes time to receive in full. When Ren has all of it, he translates as best he can. They've been asleep, he says. For 100 years. The sky realm's systems are degraded. The air matter formations need maintenance. The Cloudborn have lost numbers, some of them went so deep into sleep they couldn't wake. They need time. They need to rebuild. He pauses. And they need the Void Deep monitored. Not just sealed. Actively maintained. The seal we made today is stronger than what Aldrich made, but it is not permanent. It will need attention. Sarah says, "You're describing an ongoing relationship between the Cloudborn and the human world." Ren passes this through. Old Stone That Moves response, "Yes." Then the first thing, Sarah says, is that the cloud layer needs to be at least partially passable. For communication. For maintenance checks. We can't manage a relationship with the Cloudborn if the only way to reach them is by riding in the palm of one. Old Stone That Moves looks at her directly, not through Ren, not through the yoke. The Riven leader is 60 feet tall and the human woman is 5 feet 5, and he looks at her the way a mountain looks at something that has just said something accurate and useful and unexpected. The impression that comes through the yoke is, she is not wrong. Coming back down is slower than going up. Old Stone That Moves personally carries them to the cloud layer boundary and passes them through into the lower atmosphere. The cloud layer has partially closed around the torn areas, the natural elasticity of the atmospheric boundary reasserting itself now that the Riven are no longer pressing at it from above, but the main tear is still open and will take time to fully close. Through the remaining gap, as they descend, Ren gets his last look at the sky realm. The air matter formations with their cloud-born architecture. The hundreds of Riven moving carefully on their platforms and bridges. And on a far ledge, barely visible at this distance, the small condensed form of the Hollow, sitting and looking at the sky and beginning the very long process of figuring out what 400 years of wrong choices means for whatever comes next. He takes the yoke off as they descend below the cloud layer. The silence in his head is absolute and strange after 2 days of constant signal presence. He looks at the crown in his hands. The void silver veins are the lowest he has ever seen them, barely a faint warmth in the dark metal. Not dark with inactivity. Dark with rest. Like something that has done exactly what it was made to do and is now, for the first time in a very long time, not urgently needed. The tear in the cloud layer deposits them approximately 6 miles from Lisa's practice yard, which they walk. Ren's legs work. His head still aches. The bleeding has stopped. Sarah is silent beside him, and the silence is not uncomfortable. It is the silence of two people who have just survived something and are giving themselves a moment before the world reasserts itself. The world reasserts itself quickly. Crane and Lisa and the 6 wardens are at the practice yard. There are also, unexpectedly, 4 additional riders bearing royal palace colors. And with those riders, looking like a man who has been awake for approximately 40 hours, is King Idrin III. Ren stops walking. He looks at the King of Velmor standing in a practice yard surrounded by soldiers. Sarah says, "Father." The king looks at his daughter. He takes in her appearance, the sky realm cold in her coat, the altitude flush in her face, the absolute certainty in her posture. He looks at Ren beside her, the small dirt-edged teenager with the ancient crown of black iron in his hands and blood dried at his ears, and the steady, weary, completely unself-conscious calm of someone who has just finished something enormous. He looks at Crane. He looks at the sky above them where the cloud layer is still faintly torn in one section, a visible reminder of what has been happening. He says, "I should have listened in the council chamber." Sarah says, "Yes." He says it again, "I should have listened in the council chamber. I deferred to Kale because I have been deferring to Kale for 15 years and I did not examine the habit clearly enough." He looks at Ren. "You are Ren Ashfield." "Yes, your highness." "You found the Yoke of Heaven in a field." "Yes." "And went up into the sky realm and sealed the void deep boundary and prevented a war between the Cloudborn and the human world." "With Sarah. And the Riven leader. I couldn't have done it alone." The king is quiet for a moment. He looks at the yoke. Then back at Ren. "What do you need?" It is the right question. Ren gives him credit for it. Not what do I need to make this right, not how do I fix my image, not what do I do about Kale. What do you need? The person in front of him, who is currently carrying the most critical artifact in the kingdom's history and who just sealed an ancient supernatural boundary through effort that is visibly carved into every line of his 17-year-old body. What do you need? Ren thinks about this. Then he says, the void deep seal needs to be maintained. Someone has to monitor it through the yoke. That requires access to the sky realm and ongoing communication with the Cloudborn, which requires a formal structure that doesn't depend on one person climbing through a cloud tear. He pauses. The cloud layer needs a permanent passable point, which the Cloudborn can help create if there's a reason to maintain it, which means there has to be a formal relationship between Velmor and the sky realm, not just myth and fear and an ancient crown in a field. The king says, and you? What? What do you need? For yourself. Ren looks at him for a long moment. He thinks about the parcel, the gray paste, the military manual in the trash, the 8 months left on the contract, the plan that has been his whole internal life for 3 years. He looks at the yoke in his hands. He looks at Sarah, who is watching him with an expression he has not seen from her before. Not composed, just present, waiting. He says, my binding contract voided, and my enlistment papers signed. The king says, the Warden Corps? I was going to sign up in 8 months anyway. He pauses. I'd like to start now. Crane, who is standing 3 feet away, makes a sound that is not quite a laugh but is adjacent to one. Then he straightens and says, with absolute formal correctness, Your Highness, I would like to personally recommend Ren Ashfield to the Warden Corps on the grounds of demonstrated extraordinary service to the Kingdom of Velmore. The king says, Granted. He pauses. The contract is also voided. Obviously. Kael Drost's tribunal takes 6 weeks. It is not quick because Kael Drost is very good at finding procedural delays and alternative interpretations. But the signal instrument in his basement is physical, technical, documented evidence, and Crane's testimony is airtight, and in the end the tribunal has no good alternative to its verdict. Kael is removed from all positions, stripped of his residence and title, and exiled to the eastern border provinces under Warden's supervision. He does not accept this with grace. He accepts it with the dignity of a man who is already thinking about next steps and who is significantly underestimating how thoroughly the people watching him have learned to watch people like him. He will be a problem again someday. Not today. The king convenes a full council, real this time, with Sarah in attendance as a formal advisor on the Cloudborn situation. The historical record on the Cloudborn is unsealed and made available to the archive's full scholarly community. The old prohibition on studying the Sky Realm texts is lifted. Scholars start filling the archive's reading rooms almost immediately because the prohibition created a very large backlog of suppressed curiosity, and that curiosity does not take long to become active. Lisa Thorne is reinstated as Warden Commander. She declines. She has been running her private training yard for 8 years and she is good at it, and she does not want to spend her remaining career in the palace political environment. What she agrees to is a consultant position with no fixed office and the authority to come and go as she needs, and to personally oversee the development of the new Cloudborn Liaison Division of the Warden Corps. This is a job she accepts because she invented it in the conversation and it does not actually involve being in the palace most of the time. Elric Crane is promoted. He accepts this with approximately the same expression he brings to everything, which is the expression of a man who is aware of how things work and who is going to do what needs doing regardless of whether he personally enjoys the process. The cloud layer tear is not closed artificially. It closes on its own over the course of 2 weeks, the atmospheric boundary reasserting itself. But before it fully closes, a delegation of 3 Riven, including Oldstone that moves, comes down through the tear in a controlled, deliberate descent, landing in the farmland northeast of Thornwall and waiting, with approximately the kind of patience that 400 years of deep sky waiting gives you, for the human world to figure out how to receive them. Crane goes to receive them. He brings Ren. The first formal meeting between the Velmore government and Cloudborn representatives takes place in a farmer's field on a cold spring morning. Warden Captain Elric Crane and 17-year-old Warden recruit Ren Ashfield on one side and 3 60-foot Divine Sky Warriors on the other, and they sit down in the dirt together and they begin. The permanent Sky Realm access point takes 8 months to establish. It is a specific location on a plateau in the northern mountains where the cloud layer is consistently thinner, and the Cloudborn, using their knowledge of air matter formation, create a structure that stabilizes the boundary at that point into a permanent passable state. It looks like a pillar of compressed cloud matter reaching from the mountain plateau up through the sky, visible for 50 miles in clear weather, and it becomes the most visited non-palace landmark in Velmore within a year of its establishment. People come from neighboring kingdoms to see it. Other kingdoms start sending their own delegations. The world does not change overnight. The human world and the Sky Realm are 400 years and 3 miles and enormous fundamental difference apart. But the door is open. And that is not nothing. The Warden Corps is not what the military manual described. The manual was 60 years old and somewhat idealized, and the actual daily reality of being a recruit in the Warden Corps involves significantly more inventory management and significantly less dramatic combat than the manual suggested. Ren does not mind this. He is used to work that is less interesting than its purpose. He is also, it becomes clear to anyone paying attention within about 3 weeks of his enlistment, excellent at the actual job. It isn't the yoke or his experience in the Sky Realm that sets him apart. His edge comes from 9 years of disciplined self-training behind a barn, paired with a reading habit that arms him with more historical and tactical context than most recruits develop in 3 years. Above all, it stems from a quality of attention his commander will later describe as the rarest thing she has ever seen in a new recruit, the genuine habit of listening first. He is assigned to the Cloudborn Liaison Division as soon as it exists, which everyone expected, including him. He becomes Crane's field liaison. He works with Oldstone that moves and the other Riven through the yoke on the Void Deep Boundary Monitoring Program, which settles into a manageable routine of twice-weekly signal checks and quarterly Sky Realm visits. The boundary holds. The thing in the Void Deep has been quiet since the sealing, not gone but contained, and the combined attention of the Riven, the Hollow, and the yoke's ongoing maintenance keeps it that way. The Hollow becomes something no one entirely expected. It does not reintegrate with the Riven community. It does not try to. What it does is station itself permanently at the void deep boundary, which is now accessible from the sky realm through the passages it spent 400 years navigating, and it watches. It does not say much to the Riven. It says almost nothing to the humans. But it is there, every time Ren does a check, sitting at the boundary in the same way a guard sits at a gate. Not because it was told to. Because 400 years of guilt is a very good motivator, and this is the only reparation it knows how to make. Ren does not tell anyone what to do with this. He reports it to Crane and Sarah and lets them incorporate it into the formal documentation as they see fit. His assessment, in the field report, is 3 words: the Hollow watches. Sarah does not become a political figure in the traditional sense. She becomes something the kingdom has not had before, which is a position that combines the archive with a court in a way that has actual authority. She calls it the Council of Records, which is a deliberately neutral name for what is essentially the person who knows everything about everything the kingdom has ever done and is now empowered to use that knowledge in real policy. The king gives her this position without argument. Most of the court is afraid of her, and the ones who aren't are smart enough to know that having her on the inside is better than any alternative. She keeps studying. She always keeps studying. She and Ren develop a working relationship that is exactly as complicated as you would expect between a princess-turned-policy architect and a parcel laborer-turned-warden liaison-turned-sky realm diplomat. Which is to say, it is not simple, and they are both very busy, and most of their significant conversations happen at odd hours in the archive or in the back of a field tent during quarterly sky realm visits, and neither of them exactly acknowledges what the relationship is except through the cumulative pattern of all the things they do. This is fine. They have time. There is one last thing. 8 months after the sealing of the Void Deep, during a routine boundary check, Ren puts the yoke on and reaches down through the sky realm floor to the boundary. He checks the signal. He checks the Hollow's presence. He checks the structural integrity of the seal. Everything is exactly where it should be. The seal is solid. The boundary is quiet. As he is about to take the yoke off, something happens. Something that has never happened in 8 months of checks. Something from the Void Deep side, from the sealed and contained and apparently quiet force that has not shown any activity since the boundary closed, makes a move. Not against the seal. Not trying to break through. It simply, deliberately, reaches back through whatever thin resonance the yoke creates even on a closed boundary, reaches back the way a whisper reaches through a wall, and it says something. Not in the yoke's impression language. Not in cloud-born communication. In something that bypasses all of that and lands directly in the deepest part of Ren's consciousness with perfect clarity. It says his name. Not Ren. Not Ashfield. His full, real name, the name that is encoded in his blood and his genetic structure and the specific pattern of cloud-born lineage that makes him compatible with the yoke, the name that exists below and before any name his family ever called him. The name the yoke knows and the cloud-born biology knows and that nothing else should know. It says it once. And then it is quiet. He takes the yoke off. He sits on the sky realm floor with the Hollow 3 meters away and Old Stone that moves watching from the platform above and the whole vast sky realm around him and the whole human world 3 miles below him. The Hollow is looking at him. It knows something happened. Through the yoke's residual impression it can tell. Its ancient face is as unreadable as it always is, but underneath the surface, in the impression layer, there is something that Ren recognizes. He has felt it on the Hollow every time he has been here since the sealing. He looks at the Hollow. He says, "It's been awake this whole time." The Hollow is quiet for a moment. Then it projects, simply, always. He looks at the Void Deep boundary. Solid. The Riven's physical weight pressing from above and the Hollow's active maintenance from this side and the yoke's signal running through it all. He puts his hand on the boundary surface. He can feel the thing on the other side the way you feel a very hot object without touching it. The heat is there. And it knows he is there. And it knows his name. He says, not through the yoke, not in any special language, just out loud in the open sky 3 miles above the human world, "I'm not going anywhere." The boundary is quiet. He stands up. He picks up the yoke. He looks at Old Stone that moves, who is watching him with those silver-white eyes that Ren has come to be able to read the way you come to read any face you have spent enough time with. He says, "Same time next quarter." Old Stone that moves makes a gesture that, through the yoke's impression, translates to something like, "Agreed. Be careful." Ren nods. He goes to the descent point. He goes down through the cloud layer. He comes out into the human world, into the cold morning air above the northern mountains and the plateau where the permanent access pillar stands. He lands on the plateau. He looks back up at the sky. Above the cloud layer, somewhere in that vast and incomprehensible sky realm, hundreds of ancient warriors are rebuilding their world and monitoring a boundary and learning, slowly, what it means to have neighbors 3 miles below who are also, slowly, learning the same thing. And below the sky realm, in the dark that is not quite dark of the Void Deep, something very old and very patient is still there. Knowing his name. He wraps the yoke in the canvas he still keeps in his coat. He walks down the plateau path toward the road and the long ride back to Thornwall. His horse is at the path bottom, tied to a ring bolt. Crane will be at the city gate. Sarah will be in the archive with a fresh stack of documents and 3 questions she was researching while he was gone. Lisa will have left a training note on his desk. The world will be doing the ordinary things it does between the extraordinary ones. He puts one foot in front of the other down the mountain path. Farmer boy turned warden turned skybridge turned something without iful name yet, with the most dangerous artifact in the world wrapped in plow canvas under his arm and the name the dark nose in the back of his skull like a second heartbeat. He rides home. 14 months after the events at Thornwall, the parcel system was finally abolished by royal decree. This wasn't due to Ren's direct influence. Rather, it was the culmination of Sarah's relentless 9-month effort to build an airtight case. Meticulously gathering documents, historical precedents, and economic analyses, she forced a 5-hour session with the king's full council that left them with absolutely no room for counter-argument. The parcels are dissolved. The landowners are compensated at a rate Sarah determined was fair, which was less than they wanted but more than they deserved, and the laborers become free citizens with guaranteed resettlement support. Ren hears about this in a field report from Crane, not from a royal announcement, because Sarah delivered the news to the Warden Division through the standard courier system instead of making a personal presentation because she is, as always, doing 7 things at once and personal presentations are inefficient. The field report mentions it in paragraph 4. Ren reads paragraph 4 3 times. He writes Sarah a note. The note is 7 words. The parcel laborers will remember your name. She writes back 2 days later. Her reply is 4 words. That was not my goal. He writes back, that's why it will work. There is a 2-week gap after that before they are in the same place again, which is a quarterly Sky Realm visit, and they do not reference the correspondence directly. But when they are standing on the mountain plateau waiting for the Cloudborn to receive them and the morning light is hitting the permanent sky pillar and turning it amber and gold, she stands beside him with her navigation instruments in her pack and he stands beside her with the yoke under his arm, and it is quietly and entirely clear that none of what is working in the world right now works without both of them, and they both know it, and that is its own kind of conversation. Old stone that moves descends to meet them. The pillar glows. The sky above is full of beings rebuilding their world. The boundary below holds. The thing in the void deep knows a name and waits. And a boy from Parcel 19 who found a crown in a field puts it on his head one more time and reaches out across the most important distance in the world and says, in the language without words, I am here. I am watching. Nothing comes through today. The sky answers, understood. And the work continues.